Chapter 1189. He couldn't be blamed for making wild guesses. Yi Qian's rise was too mysterious. After investigating for 4 years, he couldn't find anything else other than the fact that Chen Dongfeng from Fujian Town High School had been taking care of Yi Qian. Soon, Yi Zhifan knew he guessed wrong. After hearing the whole story from the Yi family's housekeeper, Yi Zhifan, who was in a daze for a long time, wished he hadn't guessed wrong. He'd rather guess that his aunt's family came looking for Yi Qian and mistook her for his aunt's granddaughter. "We're in big trouble," he muttered softly. His brows furrowed deeply. He didn't think that the usually shrewd old Madame Yi would dare to spread rumors about Ho Zi, who even the provincial government wouldn't dare to provoke. Ho Zi was keeping Yi Qian as a mistress. How could she dare to think and say that? Fortunately, he didn't know about this. Since Ho Zi made a move, she must have found out that he wasn't involved in this from the beginning to the end. Yi Zhifan realized that it was impossible to prevent Yi Qian from taking the college entrance exam. Sun Yaozu also thought about it. After hearing about what happened from his subordinates in the villa, he decided to stay in a hotel and didn't plan to go home for a while. Old Madame Yi and Yi Zhisheng suffered when he didn't go home. With a knife on their necks, they worried about him every night. In less than 3 days, the mother and daughter lost a lot of weight. Old Madame Yi used to be in good spirits, but after 3 days, she finally looked like she was in her 60s instead of her 50s. The soft knife that Ho Zi set up was very bright and sharp, but it just didn't fall down for a while. The old Madame Yi finally went directly to the hospital under great mental pressure. Sun Yaozu, who didn't come back, called back a few thugs from the coastal area to guard the hospital, which made Madame Yi feel more at ease. There were still 4 days until the college entrance exam. Yi Qian took the file from Ho Zi. She didn't know what was going on and took out a piece of A4 paper. When she saw the words, Provincial First High School Grade 12 Class 1 Yi Qian kept by a mysterious rich businessman, printed on it, she couldn't help but clear her throat. "Brother Z, you can just get rid of it. You really don't have to send it over for me to take a look," she said unnaturally. It was really embarrassing. He had never thought that there would be a day when he would be rumored to be a mistress by the famous third master Ho. Ho Zi smiled faintly and said, "I also investigated the Yi family and found a few interesting things. I'll tell you about it after your college entrance examination." As soon as she finished speaking, she received a glare from Xiao Wei. She immediately added, "If I say it now, I'm afraid it will affect your exam. Don't stand here if you don't know how to talk." Xiao Wei's expression darkened. She turned to comfort Yi Qian. "Compared to your college entrance exam, these trivial matters are nothing. It's just a bunch of trivial matters. Sixth brother asked me to come over and tell you to take the college entrance exam well. He will try to make a trip back during your college entrance exam." Nowadays, the school didn't allow grade 12 students to casually answer phone calls. If the parents had any issues, they could contact the teachers first, and the teachers would then pass the message to the students. Even Xia Jinyuan couldn't contact Yi Qian. When she heard that old Madame Yi was in the hospital, Yi Qian, who was in a good mood, pursed her lips and smiled. The Yi family's matters are indeed a little complicated. Thank you for helping me hold them back, Brother Z. Without Ho Zi's help, old Madame Yi would come to the school again and again to cause trouble. Although she didn't want to, it would affect the school more or less. She didn't want to affect the school before graduation. Chapter 1190. In fact, Yi Qian didn't expect Ho Zi to keep the Yi family hanging and even scare old Madame Yi to the point of being hospitalized. He didn't expect this at first, but when he saw Ho Zi chasing after Xiao Wei, he vaguely understood why he made the Yi family worry for so long. It was all to get close to the woman he loved. Yi Qian couldn't help but chuckle as he watched the two figures walk away under the bright sun. That year, Houzi blew up his gun collection in Mount Daolong for Xiao Wei. From this, it could be seen how deep his feelings for Xiao Wei were. How could Houzi accept to give up and watch his beloved woman marry another man? The two of them were so compatible from the back. Coupled with Houzi's perseverance, their 17 years of relationship wouldn't end just like that. One day, they would have a happy ending. There were still 4 days until the college entrance exam. The entire third year of high school gradually calmed down from crazily revising, crazily doing questions, and crazily sprinting. The last 4 days were no longer sprinting for the college entrance exam. The teachers wouldn't always remind the students how long it was until the college entrance exam. In the last 4 days, the students gradually relaxed and sprinted towards the college entrance exam in their best condition. In 1999, the college entrance exam was first filled in before taking the exam. Some students even talked about their future college life. Their words were full of yearning. Those who wanted to go to college were already preparing for the upcoming college entrance exam. When they chatted, the most common words they heard were, "What will happen when I go to college?" And those who didn't want to go to college finally didn't have to worry about affecting those who wanted to go to college. When they heard similar words, they laughed and said, okay, I'll play with you when the time comes." The third year's class 1 students had the worst grades. They had no problem getting into a second-tier university. Therefore, the topic they talked about the most was, "Your school is too far from mine. It's too long to take the train. My dad did some research. Your school's management major is quite good. I'm a little regretful that I didn't apply to your school. Don't mention it. I regret it too. If the admission cutoff score this year is too high, I'm worried that I won't be able to get in. It'll be so embarrassing if I have to restudy. What did Yi Qian apply to? How come I don't know? She gave up on Tsinghua University and West University. What school did she apply to? I don't know. I didn't hear it from her. And Jiaxin and the others don't know either. Every time they chatted, the topic would always unknowingly turn to Yi Qian. Although some students also kept the school they applied to a secret, Yi Qian was always the center of attention, so he always attracted a lot of attention. Not only were the students in the same class discussing in low voices, but the students from other classes were also discussing in low voices. However, no one knew which school Yi Qian had applied to. In the past, she would feel a little jealous when she mentioned it. However, with the college entrance examination in 4 days, she couldn't help but feel a little melancholy when she talked about it again. At the same time as the college entrance examination, the time that you, I, and he spent together also entered the countdown. This also meant that their high school lives were coming to an end. After going their separate ways, they might not have the chance to meet again in the future. The feeling of jealousy lessened, and the reluctance to part increased. Yi Qian had always known that her classmates were secretly discussing which school she had applied to. Originally, she wanted to tell her classmates, but after Teacher Tong talked to her, she found out that there were only 4 students in the entire Nan province who had applied to the National University of Science and Technology. She was the only girl who had applied to the National University of Science and Technology. She was also the only student in the province who had applied to the National University of Science and Technology. Chapter 1191. As the Hua University and West University of the military schools, the National University of Science and Technology only accepted a small number of students each year. The admission score for the engineering and technology courses was sometimes higher than the admission score for Hua University and West University. Yi Qian, who had always had good grades, listened to Xia Jinyuan's advice and chose the lower admission score for the command course. Even she had to fill in her application and major conservatively. It was obvious how difficult it was to get into the National University of Science and Technology in the 1990s. After Teacher Tong's reminder, Yi Qian remained silent on his application for the college entrance exam. Fortunately, the students did not pester him, which made Yi Qian feel a little relieved. On the third day of the college entrance exam, the sixth floor of Class 5 seemed to have been triggered. Pieces of paper floated up from the sixth floor like snowflakes, followed by the students of the 4 classes on the sixth floor. The candidates of the 3 classes downstairs were dumbfounded. Damn, are they tearing the books? No way, there are still 3 days left. Don't they plan to revise anymore? The students of grade 12 class 1 looked up from the sea of test papers and stacks of revision materials. They were a little confused. Tearing the books. Did the 4 classes upstairs have to be so arrogant? They seemed to be enjoying themselves. What should I do? My hands are itching too. And Jesin rubbed her hands and muttered to Yi Qian, why don't we go to the rooftop later and tear a few books? I want to tear those evil English books. Yi Qian looked at the empty desk in front of him and smiled, you can try. I can't do it. As he spoke, Teacher Tong came over with dozens of woven bags. The class representative, Lu Axayan, followed closely behind with dozens of woven bags in each hand. Teacher Tong, who was standing by the podium, still had a gentle smile on her face. She said to the students who didn't quite understand why LV Axayan came in with a woven bag, every year, the revision materials, class notes, and test papers of our grade 12 class 1 students will become the hottest materials in the next grade 12 class 3. As for me, in order to prevent you from tearing up your books like the 4 classes upstairs, I've prepared in advance to collect and bind your books. Students in the first row of each group, go to Lu Axayan to get a woven bag and put away the revision materials that you no longer need. The classroom was suddenly filled with wails. They had been fighting with Teacher Tong for 2 years, but they still lost. Teacher Tong, we also want to tear the books. I heard that this will reduce stress. We need to reduce the pressure, Teacher Tong. After wailing, all of them began to talk about it with smiles on their faces. The college entrance examination was coming, and they were about to part ways. Laughter could dilute the sadness of parting. After sending off the graduates one after another, Teacher Tong looked at the youthful faces filled with the temperament of the rising sun, and the gentle smile on her face deepened. Take out your test papers with the highest and lowest scores and tear them apart on the last day of your high school career. Just as he finished speaking, the students laughed again. What about Yi Qian? She doesn't have a highest or lowest score. Even her average score is the same. In her second year of high school, Yi Qian's grades had always been strangely stable. No matter how difficult or easy the test papers were, she could always maintain the same score. It was as if she had calculated it beforehand. Yi Qian smiled and said, I also have a test paper with high and low marks, but I don't have the chance to tear it up. She spread her hands in front of her desk. Only then did the entire class realize that her desk was the cleanest and tittiest desk in the entire class. How could it not be clean and tidy without a single book? Her homework, revision materials, and test papers had already been taken away by the teachers in advance to prevent her from learning from the other students and tearing the books. Chapter 1192. The difference, the treatment, it should be taken away in advance for the next batch of third-year students to worship and look up to. No way, not a single set of test papers is left. I wanted to snatch one for my sister. The teacher is too cruel, not leaving a single set for us students. Amidst the laughter, the monotonous high school life began to come to an end. Time passed by unconsciously. Looking back, it was already time to say goodbye. Where is my message book? Anyone who didn't leave behind a calligraphy piece, remember to leave it. There are only 3 days left, don't let me have any regrets. Young-soo, what's your contact information? Why didn't you fill it out? How am I going to find you in the future? In 1999, the most popular forms of communication were home phone, MSN, and QICQ, which had just emerged. Yi Jian was an exception. She did not have any of the 3 forms of communication. And Jason was angry. Damn, do I have to put up a missing person notice if I want to find you in the future? After her anger subsided, she left with Yi Qian through the back door at noon. She entered the internet cafe with the speed of a turtle and applied for a QQ number for Yi Qian. What's your name? Invincible in the province's #1 middle school. What about email? There has to be one. I also have to choose a self-portrait, how about a blonde girl? Opening the 1999 QICQ application, Yi Qian filled it out slowly. Although QICQ was not as popular as MSN, it was very popular in the student group. In 2000, QICQ became the main contact information for students. It could be said that every student had one. When Yi Qian wrote his name in the name column and Jason was puzzled, green helmet? What kind of name is that? Shouldn't it be more domineering? Also, helmet is a hat, right? Can I understand it as a green hat? Cuckolded. Facing a good friend who could twist a very normal name into a different meaning, Yi Qian, who was already used to it, calmly said, green represents hope, and the helmet represents protection. You can use normal thinking to understand it as protect the green hope. Don't you think it's more domineering? And Jason silently bit her fingernails and said with some internal injuries, you are indeed much more domineering. It turned out that being a cuckold could be understood in this way. The ability of good students to understand things was much higher than theirs. Yi Qian didn't bother registering her cell phone or pager number. She didn't have a cell phone or pager number. It didn't take long for Yi Qian to have a 6-digit QQ account, while Jason became her first QQ friend. Seeing her online name, Yi Qian couldn't help but rub his forehead. Please call me Empress. You're really domineering. You must have watched too many kung fu movies. A Qing dynasty drama was popular all over the country. Even she, who never watched TV, would occasionally watch it when she had a headache. The actors were very familiar. One of the maids and 2 of the girls later became big stars. However, at that time, they were already past their prime. I like how domineering the Empress is. And Jason said as she took out a graduation message book from her bag. Come on, let's add a few students' QICQ numbers. Later, we'll go to the stationery store to buy a graduation souvenir book. Everyone in the class has one, but I don't see you getting one. Classmate Jane Eyre, sometimes you have to go with the flow. In her previous life, Yi Qian had developed a cold and quiet personality. She had never participated in any group activities. Chapter 1193. There weren't as many class activities as there were in high school when she was studying in town. Plus, her classmates had developed a habit of not asking her to come along, so it was normal that Yi Qian didn't participate in class activities. And Yi Qian had been away from class for too long, so she didn't realize that there was anything wrong. If it weren't for Jason's reminder in high school, she would have remained like she was in middle school, acting alone and avoiding class activities. And Jason had helped Yi Qian a lot in her second year of high school. She had helped her integrate into high school life faster and integrate into the group. She was no longer walking alone and studying alone. Let's buy a thicker one. I'm afraid there will be other classmates. With Jason's help, Yi Qian, who had a cold personality, became much more tactful when it came to interpersonal relationships. Plus, she had a man who had held her hand as she grew up helping her. In her second year of high school, Yi Qian realized that she had changed a lot. At the very least, she could communicate with her classmates normally and wouldn't subconsciously keep a distance. No matter how thick it is, it can't be that thick. Prepare 2. One for class and one for other classes. And Jesin made the decision. Yi Qian didn't have any objections. In fact, Yi Jian had never thought of preparing a graduation note. She had been reborn and had lived 2 lives. No matter how much she integrated into the student life, she was still young and had not experienced many things. She was different from a student who had not experienced many things. But Jesin was right. Sometimes, she needed to go with the flow. Everyone in class had a message book, so how could she be an exception? Some of her classmates had started preparing one a month ago. She was the latest. Thanks to Jesin's suggestion to buy 2 guidebooks, Yi Jian handed her guidebook to LV Axian after returning to school that day. In less than an afternoon, the entire guidebook was filled with the words of every student in the class. Wow, Yi Qian applied for QACQ today. Quickly write it down. Maybe we'll have to ask her for help when we're in college. How many? How many? I'll write them down. Finally, I have a way to contact her. She didn't leave it. I didn't dare to ask. As for the other message booklet, after Zhang Bin, conveniently, took it away, the message booklet began to circulate among the various liners. When it returned to Yi Qian, the entire message booklet was filled from the first page to the last. He's very popular. Should we add all the students who left QACQ? And Jesin clicked her tongue in amazement as she flipped through the comments. I dare say that all the top 100 seniors have left comments. Yi Qian, who was earnestly writing his blessings in a message book, didn't even raise his head as he smiled faintly. I'll go to an internet cafe and add them one by one after the holidays. We can still keep in touch in the future. Yi Qian, are you done yet? Let's take a photo together. A boy stood at the door of the classroom and said with a young and inexperienced voice, several classes of students are waiting for you on the lawn. They are all waiting for you to come down. Every year, the provincial first high school would give the examinees a day and a half off. One day was for the students to rest and prepare for the exam, and the other half was for the students to take group photos in school. Taking group photos was very important. It was so important that half a day wasn't enough. After taking group photos with the entire class, it was time for the students to take group photos with each other. After the 3rd year of high school, some students might not see each other for the rest of their lives. The only way to preserve this moment was to take group photos. Chapter 1194. Yi Qian, over here, over here. And Jesin, who was standing beside Zhang Bin, jumped up and down like a rabbit as she waved at Yi Qian. They've been waiting so long for you that they've turned into a giraffe. After she finished speaking, the tall Zhang Bin smiled at his classmates and said, hurry up and decide if you want to take a photo with Yi Qian alone. Otherwise, you'll be asked to leave by the other students. Yes, 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 you must. In the future, when Yi Qian becomes famous, I can even show off my photos to my wife and brag about it. You're thinking so far ahead. You don't even have a girlfriend and you're already thinking about your wife. Coming. Hurry up and see if my hair is messed up. Yes, ma'am. If it's not messed up, I don't see you looking any more handsome. I'm so nervous. To be able to take a photo with the top student in the province. My palms are sweating. Hearing the soft voices of the boys, the popular Yi Qian walked over with a smile. 1, 2, 3, eggplant. With the sound of the camera clicking, the young and carefree smiles froze, becoming the most beautiful memories in the years to come. At 6 o'clock in the evening, when the golden sun was setting, the laughter gradually turned into sobbing. The non-resident students began to carry their empty backpacks home. The students who were not assigned to the exam also packed their luggage and checked into the hotel closest to the exam venue. The figures of the parents also appeared on the campus. It was as if they had just started school and hurried to and fro with their luggage. The same figures, the same pace, but the direction they were walking in was like a farewell. Yi Qian, who was holding a camera in his hand, stood in the shade of a tree. His gaze swept across the familiar campus bit by bit, and he unconsciously let out a long sigh. The second year of high school was over. Finished taking a photo with the principal? And Jessin, who had found her way over, interrupted Yi Qian's thoughts. Her voice was not as crisp as it had been in the photo, and it was a little heavy. It feels like the school has suddenly become much quieter. Indeed, it was quiet. Even the faint sunset had lost its last rays, leaving behind a smoky white color that enveloped the entire campus. The usual hustle and bustle had disappeared. The laughter and the sound of reading had also disappeared. It seemed that even the chirping of cicadas had become much softer, leaving only a few weak and feeble chirping. Yi Qian put his arm around her shoulder and said with a smile, "When there's a reunion, there's a parting. Let's look forward to our next reunion." Parting had always been a sad topic. Yi Qian smiled and changed the topic. "Have you packed your things? Can you move in now?" "It's all packed. The entire dormitory is empty." It was rare for Jessin to be sad, and it seemed like she wouldn't be able to get over it for a while. She and Yi Qian were both taking their exams at school. She had originally planned to stay in the dormitory and wait for her parents to come over after the exams, but Yi Qian suggested that they might as well move out of school and stay with her for a few days. The college entrance exam was on schedule. There were police officers guarding the front and back gates to clear the way for the students. On such a hot day, parents held umbrellas and chatted with smiles on their faces at the school gates, but in reality, they were even more nervous than the examinees. The buses stopped on both sides of the school road. The traffic police led the way and escorted every student into the school. The teachers who followed the buses checked on the buses again. They only left after making sure that all the students had alighted. The students from other schools who came to take the exam yesterday had already familiarized themselves with the examination halls and knew where they were. After entering the school, they went straight to the corresponding examination halls. Yi Ying, who was wearing the uniform of No. 2 high school, raised her head as she stood at the entrance of the school. After nearly 2 years, she was once again standing at the entrance of the school. In the next few days, she would definitely make the school regret ever trying to dissuade her. Chapter 1195. Yi Ying, what are you still standing there for? Let's go. A classmate urged her. Yi Ying pursed her lips, her eyes cold. She raised her head, chin slightly, and walked proudly through the provincial First High School's campus amidst the noise. Yi Qian was reminding Jessin, keep your admission ticket safe and don't lose it. Don't panic during the exam, just act like you normally do. Also, don't look around while taking the exam. I know. I'm on the first floor, you're on the fourth. Hurry. It was the first time Jessin learned that Yi Qian had the potential to be a chatterbox. She laughed and said, you're even more worried than my mom. Hurry, damn, why is she here too? Jessin almost bit her tongue as she hurriedly corrected herself. She widened her eyes and looked as if she had seen a ghost. Which exam hall is she in? God bless her, please don't be in the same exam hall as me. Yi Qian glanced at Yi Ying indifferently and chuckled. So what if she's in the same exam hall as you? You take your exam, and she'll take hers. Also, please don't be in the same exam hall as you. If she really is in the same exam hall as you, you must pretend that you didn't see her. Don't be distracted by small movements during the exam, and don't look up, okay? Also, if you find an unknown note, report it to the invigilator immediately. Don't do anything like bending over. Yi Qian was nagging, and now it wasn't Jisun who was nagging. Villains were the hardest to guard against, especially villains like Yi Ying. And Jisun had classified her as a dangerous person who needed to be quarantined for life. Yi Ying also saw Yi Jian. Her eyes suddenly darkened, and she secretly clenched her teeth. Then, with a bright and beautiful smile on her face, she walked over with an arrogant classmate, chatting and laughing with them. Her expression told Yi Qian that even if she left the provincial first high school, she would still be a celebrity in class. Look at her smug face. Bah! And Jisun rolled her eyes. What's so great about a villain getting her way? Yi Qian smiled and said a few more words to her before heading to the exam hall on the 4th floor. When he reached the 3rd floor, Yi Qian saw the arrogant Yi Ying standing at the entrance of the staircase, looking down at him. He hadn't seen her for almost 2 years, and she looked more and more like the Yi Ying from his previous life. Yi Qian's eyes darkened, and his expression turned cold as he walked past her. You want to be arrogant? Let her be arrogant towards the air. You're really shameless to be kept by a mafia boss. Being ignored, Yi Ying's expression twisted fiercely. She turned to face Yi Qian, who brushed past her, and said through gritted teeth, I want to see how good you are and what kind of score you can get. Yi Qian had no interest in stopping to talk to her. He kept walking up to the 4th floor. There were many students walking in and out of the corridor. Yi Ying wanted to restrain herself even if she wanted to vent. She chased up to the 4th floor and saw Yi Qian enter the same exam room as her. Yi Ying, who had a gloomy expression, suddenly smiled. She had wanted to find out which exam room the wretched girl would be in, and then ask her acquaintances in the education bureau to see if they could arrange for her to be surrounded by poor students. In the end, she gave up because she was worried about the mafia boss who kept the wretched girl. She didn't think that the heavens would help her and arrange for the wretched girl to be in the same exam room as her. Yi Ying's eyes flashed with calculation. Her anger from being ignored by Yi Qian was swept away and she revealed a strange smile. Yi Qian felt that in Jisun's mouth was really sharp. He didn't think that he would really be in the same exam room as her. Seeing her flickering eyes, Yi Qian's lips curled up slightly. The familiar Yi Ying was here again. It seemed like she wanted to play some tricks during the exam. Chapter 1196. Then should he play with her? While she was still considering, Yi Ying walked over. She looked down at her and sneered, You motherless thing, want to surpass me? Don't even think about it. Just you wait, stupid girl. I'll show you my true strength. You have parents, but you can still raise a child like you. You're no different from a beast. Yi Jian answered indifferently. There was coldness in his dark and bottomless eyes. He was enjoying Yi Ying's sudden change of expression calmly. You're worse than a beast. I'll give you my blessing for the college entrance examination. The exam was coming soon. Yi Ying was so angry that her face turned red. She clenched her fists and controlled her hands that were about to swing out. She gritted her teeth and said, Just you wait. Since middle school, other than just you wait, what else can you say? Yi Ying, I've been waiting. Compared to Yi Ying's angry face, Yi Qian, who was provoked, was much calmer. He continued to provoke her. You still want to play tricks in the exam? I'm also waiting. I'm looking forward to it. He said Yi Ying's plan as if he could read her mind. She was so shocked that the anger on her face was replaced by shock. Luckily, Yi Jifan taught her well. Yi Ying was only shocked for a short while. She pressed her lips together and said, I won't let you be proud for too long. I'll make you understand that you're not as good as me. So what if you have good grades? Do you think you can stand out just because you have good grades? What else do you have besides good grades? Do you know what you need to walk out of society? Relying on connections. Do you think you're qualified to compete with me? As more and more students entered the exam hall, Ying ended the confrontation with what she thought was a fierce glare. She returned to her seat. The sun had already shone on every corner of the school. Someone stood in the shade of a tree outside the school. His handsome face had a faint smile, and his eyes were gentle as he looked at the corner of the school building. He ran all the way here because of traffic control, but he was still a little late. He didn't personally send her to the exam hall. Time ticked away, and the parents who had been waiting all lowered their voices and chatted softly. Their topics revolved around the school that they had applied to and their daughter's results. Xia Jinyuan listened quietly without any intention of getting involved. It was not until the name he was most familiar with came up that he raised his eyebrows slightly and looked over. After listening for a while, his thin lips curved into a perfect smile. His little fox was so famous that even the parents of the students knew about her. 30 minutes had passed since the exam started. Yi Qian, who didn't know Xia Jinyuan was there, started answering the questions on the last page. Her writing speed was too fast, and she was very famous in all the schools in the southern province. The invigilator stood beside her, watching her answer the questions while scanning the exam hall with his sharp eyes. The invigilator, who was gradually attracted by her answering speed, couldn't help but wipe his sweat. Too fast, too fast. As a teacher, he couldn't keep up with her speed. After 50 minutes, Yi Qian finished answering all the questions. At 60 minutes, he was the first student to hand in his paper and leave the classroom. Her departure caused the entire exam hall to become even quieter. The godlike existence of Yi Qian from the province was indeed famous. No. No. Pass. Yi Ying, who was still working on the questions, looked at the figure walking past her. She bit her lower lip and stared at her unfinished paper with a gloomy look in her eyes. Chapter 1197. Other than the occasional nervous coughing in the large classroom, the entire examination hall was so quiet that only the rustling of the pens could be heard. Yi Qian's early submission of the papers had undoubtedly stimulated the students' answering speed. Even the invigilator suddenly felt the pressure increase. He stood at the side of the aisle, his eyes fixed on all the students. If he found any suspicious cheaters, he would immediately go over to investigate. Yi Ying, with a gloomy expression, clenched the note tightly. She pretended to sit up straight and glanced at the empty desk 2 seats away from her from the corner of her eye. She put away the note with great reluctance. She actually handed in her papers so early. She couldn't move at all. Wretched girl, you're lucky. There was still 1.5 hours left between 9 o'clock a.m. and 11:30 a.m. The examinees were still writing at a high speed, burying their heads in the questions. Accompanying them were the tireless cries of the cicadas. The cries were sometimes loud and sometimes hurried, just like the mood of the examinees as they worked on the questions. Why is there a kid coming out? No way, it's only been 70 minutes. Whose kid is it? Let me see. There's a girl called Yi Qian in our provincial first high school. My child said that he took 2 mock exams with her. She was the one who handed in her papers early each time. A parent who was also an examinee from the provincial first high school craned his neck to look at the school. He immediately recognized the girl who was walking over and exclaimed, "Oh my, it's really Yi Jian. This kid. She's amazing. She's done with the exam." Yi Qian was no stranger to the parents of the provincial first high school. She was the representative of the entire school at the opening ceremony every year. Every time the teacher introduced her results, she was so far ahead that the parents of the new students gasped. The difference between first place and second place was not a difference of 5 or 10 points, but a difference of 70 or 80 points. Yi Qian planned to go home and cook for Enrich when she came back from the exam. When she was a short distance away from the back door of the school, Yi Qian could hear the discussion of the parents. She couldn't help but stop in her tracks. She only wanted to hurry home and cook a good meal. She forgot that she would be seen by the parents if she came out so early. Without thinking much, Yi Qian walked to the left side of the classroom building. 3:00. A familiar and elegant male voice came from the other side of the wall. Yi Qian, who was standing in the middle of the shrubs, had a glint in his eyes. He raised his head and looked in the direction of the 3:00. The June sun was so bright that it was like a handful of broken diamonds scattered everywhere. The girl he loved looked up and smiled at him. "You're here." They had known each other for 4 years, and her smile would always inadvertently make his heart beat faster. Xia Jinyuan gazed into her dark eyes, which could disperse the heat around him, and slowly raised the corners of his mouth. "Yes, I'm here. I've walked through thousands of mountains and rivers just to walk to your side, to hear your voice, to see your smile, and to hear you say, 'You're here.' All the hardships and tiredness disappear in an instant, leaving only joy in my heart. No one will notice if we come out from here." Xia Jinyuan, who had half of his body above the wall, waved at the girl who was walking towards him. He looked at her warmly and said, "I'll keep watch for you." Having a special forces soldier keep watch for something like this was like using a sledgehammer to kill a chicken. The two of them were very close, only about 4 or 5 meters apart. Yi Qian walked over and stood on a rock in the shrubs. She looked up and smiled at the man with gentle eyes. "Did you also climb over the wall 2 years ago?" Chapter 1198. After careful investigation, there are 3 camphor trees lined up in a straight line on the right, and the corner of the wall is on the left. This is the best spot for a surprise attack. Xia Jinyuan answered seriously like a professional. With vegetation and the wall as cover, it only took 30 seconds to successfully climb over the wall without alerting the school guards. Yi Jian smiled until her eyes were like crescent moons. The leaves swayed with the wind, and the mottled sunlight shone on her face. The faint light shone on her skin, which was as fair as jade, and had a glossy luster. Her eyes were full of smiles, and the smile could not only be contained in her eyes, but also overflowed from the corners of her eyes. Xia Jinyuan saw her full of joy and heard the flowers in his heart blooming in that instant. He saw love blooming like a flower, so beautiful and prosperous that the fragrance spread from 10 miles away. There was a professional standing guard. Yi Qian took about 5 steps back, ran up the wall with one leg, and landed on the top of the wall as light as a swallow. Then, he quickly jumped down from the top of the wall in a half-crouch. Xia Jinyuan, who was standing below, looked at his open arms and raised his eyebrows. He said to Yi Qian, who jumped down without any delay, "Little fox, I don't believe that you didn't see my open arms." He wanted her to jump into his arms, but his little fox did not give him the chance. Yi Qian pursed her lips and smiled. "I just wanted to get down quickly and not get caught by the guard. I really didn't see it." Her gaze was already sizing him up, and finally landed on his face. She did not hide her fatigue like she did last time. Her eyes were clear and bloodshot, her fingers were clean, and her clothes were neat but wrinkled. His shiny leather shoes were spotless. Yi Qian felt a little relieved. She was afraid that he would rush over again, so she did not even bother to rest. "Even if they catch you today, they won't record your score." At most, they'll give you a few words of criticism. In my opinion, it's because my little fox is shy. Xia Jinyuan pretended not to notice her sizing him up and smiled faintly. His handsome face was gentle as he walked side by side with her towards the direction of the neighborhood. You can even hide your shyness well. The results of the intensive training are obvious. In a few words, there were always a few that had something to do with the training. Yi Qian, whose thoughts were exposed, replied calmly, I really didn't see it. Are you done with your work? Talking about hugging and cuddling had always been her weakness, so she had to change the topic immediately. Xia Jinyuan could not help but laugh at her calm appearance. He gently pinched her small and round earlobe and said softly, graduated from high school. Little fox, do you still remember the promise you made? During the National Day military training 2 years ago, she had said that she would confirm her relationship with him after she graduated from high school. Xia Jinyuan had rushed over because of his promise. Of course Yi Qian remembered. Hundreds of days had passed, but his feelings for her were still the same. The graduation of the 3rd year of high school was on schedule, and so was her promise. She looked at the man who had been waiting for her for 4 years with a smile. I've always remembered it in my heart. I've never forgotten it. When he made the promise, the little fox's eyebrows were young and tender, and her face was embarrassed. But now, she was natural and unrestrained, and she answered him with a calm demeanor. The scenes of the past flashed before his eyes, and today, he finally waited for the flower to bloom. Xia Jinyuan closed his eyes. Filled with tenderness, he lowered his head and kissed her forehead gently with excitement and sincerity. Chapter 1199. Although they were far away from the school gate, it was only a few hundred meters from the back gate to the residential area. The residential area was mostly rented by the parents of the provincial first high school students. A girl wearing the provincial first high school uniform was being kissed on the forehead by a tall and handsome man. Parents passing by would more or less cast inquisitive glances at them. The feeling of being watched made Yi Qian very uncomfortable, but she couldn't bear to interrupt his kiss. She couldn't see his expression clearly, but she could clearly feel his emotions fluctuating because of her words. She thought that his eyes must be very deep, and at this moment, they must be very bright. His expression was so sincere that it made her heart palpitate, because he had always been so protective of her. Before she met him, although there was light in her world, it was so monotonous that there was only one color. After she met him, the monotonous world began to be colorful. Sometimes, it was so beautiful that it made her timid and afraid to take a step forward, for fear that one day she would fall into the love net of this dangerous man and give up her life like a moth flying into the sky. She hesitated, panicked, and tried to escape, but in the end, she still couldn't walk out of his tenderness. From then on, the figure of a man named Xia Jinyuan appeared in her world. The sun was scorching, and the leaves were swaying in the wind. The rustling sound of the leaves was like the sound of flowers blooming in her heart. Yi Qian reached out and slowly hugged the man who had traveled thousands of miles for her. She couldn't refuse him, and she didn't want to refuse him. Yi Qian's hug made Xia Jinyuan feel happiness rush into his chest. The overflowing happiness made this man, who had walked through the battlefield, almost burst into tears. He knew Yi Qian too well. It was more difficult for her to make such a bold move in front of so many people than for her to fight on the battlefield. Her emotions were usually calm and reserved, and she would never reveal them easily. Now, for his sake, in order not to make him sad, she took the initiative to reach out her hands and buried her head in his embrace like a little bird. He knew that after 4 years of waiting, the flowers would bloom, and the most beautiful results would also come. No matter how many pairs of eyes stared at them, they did not break up immediately. Xia Jinyuan hugged the girl he had been thinking about day and night tightly. He did not want to let go of her so soon. His feelings could not be described with words. He only knew that he was very happy now, very happy. After some time, Xia Jinyuan heard the rustling of the leaves. He loosened his arms around her, put his chin close to her ear, and whispered, "What should I do? I want to carry you back now." Yi Qian rubbed his chin and replied softly, "Hold it in, don't be impulsive. Pay attention to control your emotions, don't lose your composure. You won't feel awkward, but I will." At this moment, Yi Jian's cheeks were abnormally red. The redness didn't just cover her neck, it spread all the way to her cheeks, ears, and even the snow-white skin below her neck was suffused with a pink diamond-like luster. After the Labor Day holiday, she turned around and kissed him because of a little jealousy. Afterward, when she was faced with everyone's gazes, she relied on her usual psychological training to stay calm and not run away. That time, she suddenly kissed a man in front of her classmates. It was the boldest thing she had done in her 2 lives, and it was also the only time. Chapter 1200. If he said that he was going to carry her now, Yi Qian thought that her heart would beat so fast that she wouldn't be able to concentrate on her exams in the afternoon. Because at this moment, when she hugged him like this, her heart was beating very fast. Xia Jinyuan chuckled. Her waist was so thin that he could wrap his arms around it with one hand. Every time he hugged her, his heart would sway because he realized that this was the best position for their bodies to be close together. It was the most suitable position for them to talk and kiss. Xia Jinyuan placed a light kiss on the top of her head and sighed. "After waiting for 4 years, my dream finally came true. I feel like I'm floating, like I'm dreaming." Yi Qian teased him, "You can think of it as a daydream. Even if I'm daydreaming, it's all about you. I think about how I sometimes need a long time to fall asleep when I wake up in the middle of the night. I also think about how I'll wait until you graduate from high school. Don't tell me I'm regretting it. Worrying about gains and losses for hundreds of days, thousands of hours." Xia Jinyuan really felt like he was floating and felt that it was a little unreal. His voice gradually lowered as he turned to hold her face, his fingers caressing her blushing cheeks. "I can feel your body temperature and see that I'm in your eyes. How could I be daydreaming? Why don't we go back and talk? There are a lot of students coming out, and some of the parents over there seem to have recognized me." Yi Qian loosened her grip on his muscular waist and tugged at the corner of his shirt. Her clear and bright eyes were glistening as she looked at him shyly. "I have an exam in the afternoon. I want to go back and rest early to prepare for the exam." The wind that blew through the leaves brought with it the coolness of summer, gradually calming them down. The gazes around them didn't disturb them, but Yi Qian was still a high school student, so she should be more mindful of her surroundings. Xia Jinyuan calmly loosened his grip, lowered his head, and gently kissed her cheek. "What do you want to eat for lunch? I'll cook to celebrate our relationship. What do you think? Soon to be confirmed as lovers." Yi Qian raised an eyebrow. Although her face was still red, her eyes were calm. So what if those faintly discernible gazes fell on her? Her relationship with him was what they saw. Xia Jinyuan reacted quickly and said, "No, we should celebrate the confirmation of our relationship." Of course, he liked the idea of confirming their relationship. Since Little Fox had spoken, he had to obey. G3 said, "It's too difficult to find a girlfriend in our line of work. I wish I could feed my girlfriend with a spoon now." G3, who had left the ranks of bachelors, was now full of beauties in the team. He even used the identity of an experienced person to educate his comrades who were still single. From the beginning to the end, he only expressed one meaning: it's not easy to find a girlfriend. Once you find one, you must dote on her, love her, and pamper her. Otherwise, you'll let down your girlfriend who worries about you all the time. Xia Jinyuan thought about it and felt that it made sense. However, his little fox was different from his girlfriend who was a G3 teacher. It was necessary to pamper her and love her. However, she was still a soldier who needed to go to the front line. He could depend on her in life, but he could not depend on her in other aspects. He had to criticize her when he needed to, and be strict when he needed to. There was a chain supermarket behind the residential area. When Xia Jinyuan walked to the meat section, the seafood section, and the vegetable section, he paused for about a minute. His mind quickly filtered through the dishes he was best at. His goal was to start choosing the ingredients accurately. Chapter 12:01. Prawns were easy to make. Just remove the intestines and steam them. Sea fish were easy to make. Just like prawns. Meat needed to be stir-fried. No, it was hard to control the heat. Pork ribs were easy. Boiled with soy sauce and fresh ginger, that was easy too. Buy more. I have a classmate coming over to eat. She has a big appetite, Yi Qian reminded him in a low voice as she followed him to choose the live prawns. Hearing this, Xia Jinyuan's smile deepened. Now that their relationship was clear, he could finally enter her life as her boyfriend and get closer to her world. And Jessen has always been curious about who my boyfriend is. I don't know if she'll remember you when she sees you later, but I'm guessing she probably doesn't. Yi Jian said with a smile. She had been walking side by side with Xia Jinyuan. Occasionally, their arms would touch intimately. Anyone who saw them would know that they were a couple. Xia Jinyuan didn't have much of an impression of her classmate, but he knew Jessen. He also knew that this girl had helped Yi Qian a lot. He smiled and said, "You were in the same class from the second year of middle school to high school. You two must be very close." "Yes, we are very, very close. She helped me a lot in school and took the initiative to integrate me into the class. She even told me that if I wanted to integrate into the environment, I couldn't be special." Speaking of her good friend, Yi Qian's expression became even gentler. Her eyes were watery, moistened by friendship and love. Her beautiful face glowed with a bright and moving radiance. Xia Jinyuan couldn't help but quickly kiss her cheek. Yi Qian glared at him and said, "Even if we are in a relationship, you can't always be so touchy." "Little fox, I was just using my mouth." "A gentleman uses his mouth, not his fists." Xia Jinyuan's expression was incomparably gentle. His handsome features revealed happiness. "Your friend is very good. She taught you how to integrate into the group and let you have a sense of belonging to the class. We all need to thank her for her help." Yi Qian's temperament in her previous life had already developed into an unsociable personality. She was a little cold and aloof. Even when she smiled, there was a sense of distance. But Yi Qian himself would never think that he was unsociable. He even thought that it was good to be alone. She would not care about how the people around her looked at her. She would not care about what happened in class or what happened between her classmates. She would enjoy her days alone and walk through her entire student life with her own tenacity and indomitable spirit. Xia Jinyuan did not want to see Yi Qian in such a state. Being independent was a good thing, but once you were independent and didn't fit in, there would definitely be problems. No matter how good her grades were, she would be isolated and ostracized by her classmates. No matter how outstanding one's abilities were, they wouldn't be recognized. Even if they joined the military, they wouldn't be able to reach the top. He couldn't take care of her in school, so he could only guide her in another way. When the provincial first senior high school's first-year students were assigned to different classes, he had specially suggested to Principal Chow to see if he could assign Jessen to Teacher Tong's class. That way, Yi Qian would have an old classmate to accompany her when she entered school. Now it seemed that his suggestion back then was very correct. And Jessen, who was cheerful and good at socializing, did indeed take care of Yi Qian in school. The problems that he had worried about previously did not occur, and she always maintained a good relationship with her classmates. Xia Jinyuan, who had a plan in mind, had always used his own way to hold Yi Qian's hand and guide her to grow up. He had used his own way to silently protect the girl he loved as she grew up. Chapter 1202. And Jessen is a very important friend of mine. I promised her that if I had a boyfriend, she would be the first to know. Yi Qian chose a piece of pork rib and smiled gently. She likes pork ribs. Why don't we make braised pork ribs together? Braised pork ribs were a little difficult. Xia Jinyuan pondered for a while and replied, we can try. It should be braised pork ribs with soy sauce. When they came back from grocery shopping and reached the third floor, Xia Jinyuan suddenly picked up the unsuspecting Yi Qian and ran up to the fifth floor with a low laugh. Although I can't carry you from outside, I can carry you from the nearest distance. Although Yi Qian was a little shocked, he quickly wrapped his arms around Xia Jinyuan's neck and let Xia Jinyuan carry him home. She didn't know how to fall in love. She only knew that when she saw how happy he was, she couldn't bear to reject him, nor could she bear to reject him. The sweet interaction didn't end until Jessen came back. One of them was cooking in the kitchen, while the other was setting the table in the dining room. As the key was pulled back, the security door was pushed open. And Jessen, who had just finished her exams, smelled the delicious aroma in the room. She was no longer half dead and screamed excitedly, "It smells so good. Grilled fish, stir-fried beef, and duck. My Jane Eyre, being with you is so blissful. Come, let's kiss." The tightly closed kitchen door was pushed open, and a handsome and tall figure walked out. And Jessen, who was about to pounce on Yi Qian, suddenly stopped halfway. She almost tripped over her right leg and tripped over herself. My boyfriend. Last time, you kept wanting to know which man I kissed at the back door. This is the man you wanted to know. Yi Qian introduced him generously. She once said that if she had a boyfriend, she would introduce him to Jessen first. You've seen him before. Take a closer look and see if you remember. And Jessen was a little confused. Jane Eyre had always been a quiet student. She was a good student in school. She didn't accept a single love letter, didn't accept any gifts from any boys, and never flirted with any boys. She was the best student that the teachers didn't have to worry about. And now, this top student was telling him that she had a boyfriend. She even brought her boyfriend to her rented place and asked him to cook for her. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. For a moment, she had a strange feeling that the two people in front of her were actually an old married couple. Xia Jinyuan smiled politely and said, "Hello, I am Xia Jinyuan, Yi Qian's boyfriend." She had already extended her hand and said her last polite words elegantly, "Nice to meet you, this, so refined. This, so polite." And Jessen was even more dumbfounded. Her brain temporarily shut down, she mechanically stretched out her hand and said dryly, "Hello, I'm Jessen, Jane Eyre's good friend." Yi Qian watched as she stretched out her hand and retracted it stiffly. He put his arm around his friend's shoulder and asked with a smile, "Do you recognize who he is?" Did he really not have any recollection of it? "Last time, you said, there's only one handsome man I've ever seen. It's the one in middle school who told us." His mouth was covered by Jessen, who had finally recovered from her stupor. "Oh my God, save us some face. I got it. Jane Eyre was too honest. She was really worried that she would tell the truth when she said, "He's so handsome that I'm drooling all over the floor." She thought she had lowered her voice and that he could hear every word clearly. Xia Jinyuan maintained his composure and said with a smile, "You two can wash your hands and eat. After eating, you can rest for a while. I'll wake you up 20 minutes in advance." Chapter 1203. And Jessen felt a stomachache from the meal. The aura of Comrade Xia, who was sitting opposite her. She didn't even dare to speak impudently. But he wasn't serious either. He had a slight smile on his face the entire time. He was as elegant as a noble prince and had a good upbringing. Even so, she didn't dare to be impudent. There was only one word to describe it: fear. When she thought of how the other party had once stood on the podium and talked about national security with a cold expression, her cold gaze felt like a knife sticking to her skin. Other than fear, and Jessen felt nothing but fear. She silently ate her food and glanced at Yi Qian from time to time. And Jessen sadly realized that the gap between them was so hurtful. Her Jane Eyre wasn't afraid at all and could even talk cheerfully. That's right, what's there to be afraid of when he's her boyfriend? As she thought about it, and Jessen suddenly felt that her classmate Jane Eyre was very impressive. Not only was she good at studying, but she also had good taste in finding a boyfriend. Only she was not afraid of a boyfriend like Comrade Xia who could intimidate people with his aura. There was no mention of the morning's exam at the dinner table. And Jessen finished her lunch at the fastest speed in her life and immediately slipped back into the guest room to give the couple some space. Even their gazes were filled with sweetness. She sat opposite the two of them and was no different from a third wheel. It was better for her to leave quickly. As for the table full of delicious dishes, and Jessen silently touched her stomach. "Sigh, my stomach, you better behave. You're destined to not have the fortune to enjoy it. Your classmate seems to be a little afraid of me." Xia Jinyuan slowly peeled prawns for Yi Qian. It was the first day they confirmed their relationship, so he preferred the space between the two of them. Just now, when he slightly released his aura, his little fox's classmate was so scared that she only ate rice and didn't eat any dishes. Within 5 minutes, she finished a bowl of rice and went back to her room to rest. Yi Qian glanced at him disdainfully. "Don't you know why Jessen is afraid of you?" There was a smile at the corner of his mouth. His gaze was firm and there wasn't a trace of emotion in it. It was obvious that he did it on purpose. His girlfriend was smart enough to see through his little scheme. Xia Jinyuan shamelessly replied, "We'll treat her to a meal later. Today is a special day, so I have to mark it as the first day of our relationship." It couldn't be helped. Major Xia would occasionally play petty tricks. It was a pity that Jessen didn't have the fortune to enjoy such a sumptuous feast. Yi Qian smiled and nodded. Next time, he really needed to treat Jessen to a big meal. "You go to the master bedroom to rest later. I'll go with Jessen and ask her how she did on the test this morning." In return, Major Xia let out a long sigh. Fortunately, he had a long vacation this time, so long that he needed to personally send the little fox to Demon King Li's training camp. After the exam, everything would be fine. Yi Qian, who was grinning from ear to ear, quickly planted a kiss on his handsome cheek. "Make it up to her. I'll go with her first." Love was important, but so was friendship. In the room, Jessen was lying on the bed and flipping through the textbook. When she heard the sound of the door opening, she immediately turned her head and smiled mischievously. "Student Jane Eyre, how do you feel after conquering the major who taught us the national defense class? Isn't it very, very satisfying?" At the age of 18 or 19, both boys and girls would have a little bit of dirty talk in private. The only difference was that the boys were straightforward while the girls were reserved. "What do you mean by satisfying?" Yi Qian didn't react in time. Instead, he answered seriously, if you mean satisfying, then it is indeed satisfying. Also, when we were training together, it was very satisfying. Chapter 1204. And Jessin rubbed her forehead. How could she have forgotten about Jane Eyre's innocence? But what did she mean by training together? At this point, Yi Qian didn't intend to hide anything from her. She laid on the bed and looked at her best friend who had never asked about her and had always helped her. She said softly, Jessin, I have something to tell you. Ah, what is it? Why are you so serious? And Jessin was frightened by her serious face. She quickly stopped smiling and frowned. Did something happen? Is it about you and Comrade Xiao? Did he bully you? Her face darkened instantly. She had the feeling that as long as Yi Jian said yes, she would immediately rush out to cause trouble. Her reaction warmed Yi Jian's heart. She hurriedly said, No, I want to talk to you about my application and my plans for the future. I feel bad that I haven't told you about it all this time. Damn, you scared me to death. I thought it was something big. It's fine if you didn't tell me. What's there to feel bad about? And Jessin immediately relaxed and smiled disapprovingly. You always have your plans. If you can't tell me about your application, then you must have your reasons. And Jessin was definitely a friend worth making. She looked carefree, but in fact, she had a lot of principles. Becoming friends with her was not only a kind of luck, but also a way to learn how to deal with people from her. Yi Qian reached out and hugged her best friend. My ambition is to join the military, so I only applied to one school, the National University of Science and Technology. When the time comes, we can only contact each other through letters. You can also leave me a message on QACQ. If I can go online, I'll definitely reply to you. Today was probably a very confusing day. And Jessin knew that she was confused again. Her best friend's ambition was to join the military, and then, there was only one goal, to get into the National University of Science and Technology. Was the National University of Science and Technology she was talking about the Hua University, or Shi University, in the military school? The one that was especially difficult to get into and only had 3 or 4 places in the southern province this year? Damn. I'm a little confused. Let me calm down. Calm down. And Jessin took a deep breath and let out a long breath before asking carefully, Is it because of your boyfriend's influence that you want to join the army? Yi Qian smiled and said, No, I was influenced by Uncle Jen and Principal Qin. Didn't I get into a big fight with Yi Ying and her mother in the 2nd year of junior high school? After everything was settled, Principal Qin had a heart-to-heart talk with me. At that time, I felt that I was too cowardly to be bullied by Yi Ying's family. There had to be a way out, so I started to think about joining the army. At first, I just didn't want to live like a coward. Later, I completely fell in love with it. I liked the roars when I trained with the soldiers. I liked to pick up a gun and hear the sound of bullets being fired. I liked the feeling of wearing jungle camouflage and fighting with the soldiers. Jessin, I've already been on this path for 4 years. In the future, there will be 4 more years until I can't wear the uniform anymore. And Jessin's expression was as if she was listening to a fantasy story. 4 years. Classmate Jane Eyre had already decided to join the army 4 years ago. Oh, my God. 4 years ago, wasn't she in the 2nd year of junior high school? On the 2nd year of junior high school, she thought all day long, I wonder what good food the snack shop has brought. I'll go and try it later. Chapter 1205. Or maybe she was thinking, I need to ask Mom for an extra $1 tomorrow. The spicy dried pork sticks in town are delicious. Also, why isn't Friday here yet? I want to watch TV tonight. While she was thinking about these things, Jane Eyre was thinking about joining the military and getting into university. The difference in hurting people was here again. I thought you couldn't find me every summer and winter. Actually, I've been training with the soldiers in the military. It's much more fulfilling than watching TV at home all day. Yi Qian's voice was very soft, like the sound of flowing water. And Jiaxin could hear it without a trace of awkwardness. Hearing this, and Jiaxin clicked her tongue and suddenly laughed out loud. Ha ha ha, then Yiying was asking for trouble when she came looking for you during the National Day of Senior Year. I was wondering why you were so perfect when you demonstrated with the instructor. You looked even better than the instructor. So you were already training at that time. You even practiced shooting. Amazing. Even the political commissar said you were amazing. So you've even touched a gun and shot a target before. With today's confession, and Jiaxin understood what she couldn't figure out in the past. Unbeknownst to everyone, Yi Qian not only studied hard but also worked hard for her goals. As she spoke, and Jiaxin became a little melancholy. I didn't expect you to do so much in secret. It seems like we only see the bright side of you. Who knows how much you've suffered behind the scenes? I don't feel like I've suffered much. I'm just working hard for my goals. The whole process is a bit like sowing seeds before reaping the harvest. Yi Qian didn't feel like she had suffered. She felt like she was enjoying the process of reaping the harvest and looking forward to the final result. There was an indescribable motivation that kept spurring her to not stop. She didn't want to waste her second life. She wanted to get back what she had lost in her previous life. She wanted to live out her life well and not let down her years. Yi Qian gently hugged Jiaxin. Seeing the faint melancholy on her good friend's face, she lowered her gentle voice. I'm not like you. If I don't work hard, I'll always be suppressed by Yiying and live in her shadow for the rest of my life. As for you, your brilliance is something that I will never be able to emulate. My friends are in groups of 3 to 5, and every time they mention you, they will always say, and Jiaxin is very good. You have parents who love you dearly, friends who are willing to play with you, and very good grades. Jiaxin, I want to thank you. You have helped me a lot in the past few years. Thank you very, very much. Yi Qian, who was not good at expressing his feelings, said so much in one breath. However, and Jiaxin's eyes widened when she heard this. She reached out a hand to touch Yi Qian's face. You're my little Jane Eyre, right? Something's not right. It's different from usual. Yi Qian, who had finally revealed his emotions, did not know whether to laugh or cry. We'll be separated in a few days. I don't know when we'll meet again. It's rare for me to feel sad, but you think I'm not the same person anymore. Classmate Jane Eyre, you just need to maintain a height that I can look up to. And Jiaxin rubbed her nose. As she spoke, her eyes turned red. You're good the way you are. Those who know you will always believe you even if you don't explain too much. What kind of relationship do we have? We're going to be good friends for life. Although you can be quite mysterious sometimes, I've always understood that you're sincerely good to me, Yang Yi, and the others. Chapter 1206. With tears still in her eyes, she giggled again. But, I think you treat me the best. Who asked us to be together when we were in junior high? I'll definitely support you joining the army. Who is Yiying? She can't be compared to you. As long as she could beat Yiying, and Jiaxin would be happy. Her giggles turned into loud laughter, and she rolled back and forth on the bed. Awesome, this is awesome. Say, when the provincial first high school puts up a banner saying, "Congratulations to Yi Qian for getting into the National University of Science and Technology," ha ha ha, Yi Ying's family will be so angry that they'll vomit blood. Ha ha ha, just thinking about it makes me happy. Yi Qian saw that she wasn't angry at him for hiding it from her. He let out a sigh of relief and couldn't help but laugh. Yeah, Yi Ying will definitely be angry then. Today, I was in the same exam room as her, and she even came to me to show off, saying that I'm definitely not as good as her. Cough, cough, cough. Her laughter turned into loud coughs, and Yi Qian was so shocked that he quickly patted her back. Look at you, laughing so hard that you're out of breath. Get up and talk. Holding Yi Qian's hand, and Jiasin coughed until tears welled up in her eyes. You're going to tell me some shocking news later. My little heart is going to break from the shock. How unlucky is Yi Ying to be in the same exam room as you? Isn't she looking for trouble? Don't hide it. You have to suppress the enemy at this critical juncture. There's a saying in the army. Yes, 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 it's like being merciful to the enemy is being cruel to yourself. Don't be merciful. But you have to be careful. What if she tries to play tricks in the exam room and implicates you? So you have to be careful, be careful. Yi Qian took out a tissue and handed it to her to wipe her tears, smiling. Actually, I'm kind of looking forward to her playing tricks in the exam room. After fighting with me for so long, I didn't really do anything to her. If she really plays tricks in the exam room, I'm looking forward to it. Hey, 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 you've become bad. And Jiasin suddenly understood what he meant. The two girls immediately laughed together on the bed. There was a knock on the door, followed by Xia Jinyuan's deep voice. There's an exam in the afternoon. You two can rest now. The two of them had been chatting in the room for half an hour. If he didn't remind her, she was afraid that they would continue chatting until 20 minutes before the exam. And Jiasin had already covered herself from head to toe with the air conditioner and pretended to be asleep. Yi Qian couldn't help but laugh. She was indeed a little afraid of Xia Jinyuan. Yi Qian didn't say anything else. He closed his eyes, thinking about Yi Ying's expression in the exam hall today. She must have wanted to play some tricks in the morning, but failed because he handed in his paper early. When she went back, she would mention to Yi Zhifan and Sun Dongqing that they were in the same examination hall as her. She couldn't rule out the possibility of more tricks in the afternoon. Yi Zhifan desperately wanted to move back to his household register. The reason was very simple. He didn't want to see himself go further and further away from him. He didn't want Ying to be unable to surpass him. In order to achieve his goal, he even asked old Madame Yi to come out of retirement, but the result was still the same. In the middle of it, she was really thankful that old Madame Yi spread rumors to Yi Zhixiang that Yi Zhifan and Ho Zi were kept as mistresses. In the end, Ho Zi was alerted to deal with this matter. Because of this, Yi Zhifan, who wouldn't give up until he achieved his goal, was suppressed, and he didn't dare to make any more moves. Chapter 1207. Yi Zhifan wouldn't give up so easily now that there was a chance to make all his efforts go to waste and even disqualify him from the college entrance exam. There was a 50% chance that Yi Ying would make a move in the afternoon. Yi Qian, who was lying on the bed, closed his eyes and thought. Meanwhile, Yi Zhifan, who was sitting on the side of the hotel bed, was quietly listening to his daughter speak. Dad, I want to take a gamble. If I lose, I'll admit it. But I still have a 50% chance of winning. Dad, I want to try. Yi Ying, who had finished her lunch, didn't even bother with her lunch break. She gritted her teeth with a sinister expression. As long as there's a chance, I'll give it a try. I won't let her have the chance to step on my head again. Dad, I've always remembered how she kicked me out of the provincial No. 1 middle school back then. Sun Dongqing sat on the side and looked at her husband and daughter. After a while, she couldn't hold it in anymore and said fiercely, we have to teach that wretched girl a lesson. Otherwise, she'll think that our Yi Ying is easy to bully. If it weren't for old Yi always telling her not to go to the provincial #1 middle school and cause trouble for that wretched girl because it would affect his reputation in the government, she would have gone there long ago. Go and take the things. Don't cause trouble. Yi Jifan didn't agree immediately. This was a serious matter and related to his daughter's future. He couldn't afford to make any mistakes. He gently reprimanded his wife and then said to Yi Ying, although the risk is 50%, Yi Qian's ability is a little beyond my expectations. Ying, Dad can say that you don't have a 50% chance of winning. Yi Ying's voice suddenly rose and sounded a little shrill. Dad, are you saying that I'm not as good as Yi Qian? Even you think that I'm not as good as her? Who said that? Who said that our Ying is not as good as that wretched girl? Sun Dongqing, who was cleaning the table, jumped up and pointed at Yi Jifan's nose. Yi Jifan, I'm telling you, don't compare that wretched girl to our Ying. Our Ying is a top student at Tsinghua University and West University. Even her homeroom teacher said that as long as she performs normally, it won't be a problem for her to get into the top universities. What can this wretched girl get into? I think she should thank the heavens for even getting into a third-rate university. Yi Ying was even angrier. If Yi Qian could only get into a third-rate university, why would she do something like that during the college entrance exam? Mom, can you stop interrupting? I'll talk to Dad. Can you go back to your room and rest? Yi Ying's voice was filled with anger. Dad, I don't care how confident I am. I have to try. If I really fail, I'll just repeat my studies for a year. If you succeed, think of a way to make this matter worse. Let the Education Bureau punish Yi Qian as a warning to others and permanently disqualify Yi Qian from taking the college entrance exam. You also have to think about the jade pendant in our hands. If the person behind the jade pendant knows that Yi Qian is more promising than me, do you think he will abandon our family and support Yi Qian? None of the other words had touched Yi Jifan's heart. Only this sentence had touched the bottom of his heart. The sound of footsteps could be heard in the hotel corridor. It was the parents who had accompanied their children to school for the afternoon exam. Listening to the sound of footsteps and the parents' reminders gradually fade away, Yi Jifan waited until the surroundings were so quiet that only Yi Ying's heavy breathing could be heard. He said, "Be careful." The sun was at its brightest in the afternoon. Yi Qian stood at the school gate and looked at a boy who was wearing the provincial #1 middle school's uniform. The boy walked unhurriedly beside them and smiled at Xia Jinyuan, who had brought her over. "Go back and wait. You don't have to stand under the sun. I'll be back in about an hour. Go back and rest." Chapter 1208. No matter how clean he was, she still felt that he had not rested well. "Okay, I'll watch you go in." Xia Jinyuan also looked at the boy, who looked decent in the provincial #1 high school's uniform. His thin lips curled up slightly. "I'll come and pick you up in the afternoon." And Jessin looked at her good friend who was sweetly reminding her and could not help but feel disappointed again. Yi Qian, who had fallen into the river of love, had indeed changed. He was no longer as unattainable as before. The smile on his face was like a blooming flower. It's different when you're in love. You smile like a blooming flower. She also wanted to be in love. Like Jane Eyre, she could be in love and study at the same time. She was just afraid that she would not study hard when she was in love. And Jessin, who did not even notice that she had said it out loud, suddenly felt her hair stand on end. She felt like she was being stared at by a ferocious beast. She looked up abruptly, but there was nothing. Xia Jinyuan and Yi Qian calmly looked away from the man who was less than 2 meters away from them. The T6 combatant was here, and he was even shamelessly wearing the provincial number 1 high school's uniform and mingling with a group of students. I have an ominous feeling. I have to go into the classroom. And Jiasin rubbed her arms and said softly to Yi Qian, I felt like something was staring at me just now. Could it be Ying? Ahem. Xia Jinyuan raised his clenched fist to the corner of his mouth and cleared his throat. He turned sideways and glanced at the T6 combatant. Bro, you should at least restrain yourself a little. The T6 combatant, who had a baby face and delicate facial features, blinked and then raised his eyebrows in Jiasin's direction. The meaning he wanted to express was quite obvious. Bro, I think this girl is not bad. Introduce her to me. Xia Jinyuan looked away. His marriage had already been resolved, but his brother's marriage. It seemed like he had to bear some responsibility. But wasn't it a little too hasty to think that he thought she was not bad with just one glance? The T6 combatant, who was full of joy, watched helplessly as his comrade mercilessly looked away. He felt so jealous that he wanted to rush up and introduce himself. When the T6 combatant saw Yi Qian pulling the delicate girl behind him and forcibly blocking his view, he lowered his head in silence. The two of them had joined forces to bully him, who was all alone. I'll go in first. Yi Qian did not stay any longer. He grabbed Jiasin, who was looking around, and calmly pulled her out of the T6 combatant's line of sight. It was so strange just now. I clearly felt like something was staring at me, but I couldn't find anything when I swept my gaze over. Do you think it's that despicable Yi Ying's doing? And Jiasin still hadn't forgotten the stare that gave her goosebumps. After taking a few steps, she turned around to look behind her. Yi Qian smiled and said, It's nothing. Maybe you're a little nervous about the exam later. Don't be nervous. Your foundation in mathematics has always been very good. Mathematics was your forte in junior high, let alone in high school. You could even make it into the top 10 of your cohort and get into the university of your dreams. As the two of them walked further and further away, the T6 combatant came up to Xia Jinyuan and said with a smile, That must be Yi Qian's good friend. She's quite a nice girl. You two seem to hit it off. Do you want to come out for dinner tonight? Introduce her to me. You have a strong motive. You even shamelessly put on a high school uniform. Xia Jinyuan removed the hand on his shoulder and looked up and down at the T6 combatant, who still looked decent in his school uniform. He said mercilessly, You want to get a girlfriend dressed like this? It would be strange if a girl would fall for you. Chapter 1209. T6 humbly asked for advice. I'm inexperienced, so please give me some tips. I secretly took this set of clothes from my cousin's closet. I'll be returning it later. Only when he said that did Xia Jinyuan remember that T6 was also from southern province. I can't help you with this. You'll have to ask Yi Qian. Also, why did you come to First High School? You don't seem to have a simple motive. I suddenly remembered that Yi Qian isn't in First High School during my 15-day break. I was wondering if I should come over to take a look and settle my marriage while I'm at it. My family is giving me a headache. How old am I? I'm only 27. Is it that hard to find a wife? After returning for 3 days, T6 spent the first day with his parents. The next 2 days were all about blind dates. Xia Jinyuan accidentally asked about T6 troubles. Comrades were meant to share weal and woe together, so T6 did not mind sharing his troubles with his comrade. Change your clothes before you talk about blind dates with me. Otherwise, I'll feel like I'm going on a blind date with a high school student. I won't want to talk to you at all. Let's go and change our clothes. I urgently need your advice. Also, I really think that girl just now is not bad. She made me feel like my heart was being electrocuted. Faced with Xia Jinyuan's cold gaze, T6 immediately said seriously, in layman's terms, I was electrocuted. Xia Jinyuan raised his eyebrows. Why didn't you pass out from the electrocution? I could have gotten her to come back and give you CPR immediately. After a moment of silence, T6 gave his comrade a thumbs up. That's a brilliant move. How would I have thought of it if you didn't mention it earlier? Why don't we use it tonight? I'll pretend to be unconscious while you pull the girl over and give me CPR. Xia Jinyuan felt that it was a little difficult to progress on this topic. When encountering someone who was even more shameless than him, he usually only had one feeling: he really wanted to beat him up. But today was the first day he confirmed his relationship with Little Fox, so it was not appropriate for him to go on a killing spree. He might as well let him off this time. He looked quite pitiful. And Jessin, who had just entered the classroom, had no idea that she had electrocuted a Special Forces soldier. With a serious expression on her face, she opened the test paper and adjusted her state of mind as quickly as possible. Then, she began the afternoon math test. The exam had just begun, and the invigilator did not immediately use his fiery eyes of truth to inspect the examination hall. He only reminded them, take the exam seriously, take the exam seriously. Then he stood by the aisle and did not say anything else. Yi Qian was the fastest student in the entire exam hall. The other students had to stop writing from time to time to think, but she had already calculated the answer in her mind by the time she finished reading the question. She just had to write on the blank space. Teachers from different schools would invigilate every exam. Almost every teacher from every school knew Yi Qian from the province's #1 middle school. Whenever they saw Yi Qian's ID during the examination, they would immediately look up and size him up. When it was time for the exam, they would stop by Yi Qian's desk and watch her answer the questions. Half an hour later, Yi Qian finished answering the A and A questions. The invigilator next to her looked at her in shock. He could not accept the speed at which she answered the questions without thinking. He originally thought that she would make a mistake, but when he finished calculating in his mind, he realized that there was no mistake at all. The invigilator was not in a hurry to leave, but Yi Qian. It was Yi Ying. She worked on the questions for a while, then glanced down from the corner of her eye. When she saw that the invigilator was still there, she was so angry that she bit her lower lip so hard that a circle of teeth marks appeared. Of course, Yi Qian knew that someone had been looking at her with a gloomy gaze. She remained calm and answered the questions one by one, not giving herself any chance to be distracted. Chapter 12:10. The invigilator blocked Yi Ying's line of sight, so she couldn't see Yi Qian's speed. She also didn't see that Yi Qian had already started working on the questions on both sides of the CD and CD. After the invigilator left, she glanced over and saw Yi Qian stop writing to think about the last two questions. Seeing this, Yi Ying sneered disdainfully. Didn't they say that she was fast at solving questions? Didn't she always hear the students from #1 middle school say that Yi Qian handed in his paper early again? It must be a lie. How could her speed be considered fast? What a joke. Yi Ying had always been conceited. In addition, she was like a fish in water in the provincial #2 high school. Her speed in solving questions in every exam was also very fast, which made her even more unwilling to believe that Yi Jian could really solve the questions faster than everyone else. I'll let you be smug for a while, damn girl. Yi Ying muttered softly. Her eyes flashed with malice. She didn't look at Yi Qian anymore and quickly caught up with her own questions. If she wanted to set him up, she had to finish the questions herself. Every time, she relied on her own ability to rank among the top few in #2 middle school. With such outstanding results, Ying didn't believe that she couldn't beat Yi Qian. Ying wasn't stupid. It was just that when she met Yi Qian, she was a little crazy. It was easy for her to make wrong decisions and make wrong decisions. But this time, even Yi Jifan agreed. It had to be said that for the jade pendant, Yi Jifan was also gambling with Yi Ying's future. If he lost, with Yi Ying's intelligence, it wouldn't be a problem for her to repeat a year and get into university. If he won, he would make sure that Yi Qian would never be able to get back the jade pendant. He would make sure that she would never be able to change her life. This was a gamble with life. In Yi Jifan's heart, he wasn't just betting on Yi Ying's future, he was betting on his own future as well. Today, he deeply understood that the reason he rose from a village official to a provincial official was all because of the jade pendant in his hands. Compared with his career, Yi Jifan chose his own career. As long as he had a smooth career and had a meteoric rise, there would be no problem for his daughter to re-enter a university. It was just a waste of another year. Yi Jifan himself did not hold much hope that Yi Ying would be able to stop Yi Qian from taking the college entrance exam. Yi Ying had never won against Yi Qian in the past few confrontations. Now that Yi Qian had Hou Zi behind him, and he was not sure if his aunt's family had come to look for their relatives. Furthermore, he had to pay attention to his image as an official at all times, so he had some misgivings when dealing with Yi Qian. Letting his daughter take action was the best choice. Whether they could win or not depended on God's will. Yi Jifan, who was standing outside the school, took a sip of cold water and stared at the school with a malicious gaze. Yi Qian, don't blame your uncle for being ruthless. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for being too outstanding. You've made our entire family feel threatened. Only by getting rid of you will we be able to move on quickly. Ji was still tirelessly calling out. The parents were fanning themselves with their cattail leaf fans to disperse the worry in their hearts. I don't know if this year's math will be difficult. Last year's math was too difficult. One of my colleagues said that a few students fainted in the classroom. What a sin. 3 years of hard work went down the drain. It was all in vain. Isn't that so? Please don't let anything happen this year. The worst thing is to see a child faint from nervousness. The parents will be sad. When the child wakes up, they won't be able to accept it. That's right. Thousands of soldiers and horses crossed the bridge in hopes of getting into a university during the college entrance exam. Sigh, please don't let anything happen. Chapter 12:11. Yi Jifan heard the constant chatter of the parents. He raised his head and looked at the setting sun. His Ying's mental fortitude for the exam was not bad, so he didn't have to worry about her fainting. But, he didn't know if she would succeed. Passing notes in the college entrance exam, sigh, was the worst method. It was very likely that both parties would suffer, and neither of them would be able to participate in the exam. Ever since Ying said that she planned to use the passing notes method to frame Yi Qian, Yi Jifan didn't have much hope. Instead, he hoped that his daughter would be smarter. The worst-case scenario would be that both parties would suffer. He would definitely have a way to make his daughter retake the exam for a year and resume it. Time ticked by, and the sun in the west finally stopped shining directly on the teaching building. The examination hall seemed to have become much cooler. Yi Qian, who was solving the questions, was a little excited. The more excited she was, the more focused she became. Her brain was like a high-speed computer, solving all the questions on the exam paper. As she wrote, the corners of her mouth rose, revealing a smile that none of the other candidates had. The invigilator standing next to her was a little uneasy. She could solve the college entrance exam questions. Smile, this was the first time in 3 years of invigilating. Finally, the invigilator stopped staring at Yi Qian from time to time. A student like this wouldn't cheat, because there was no need for her to do so. Yi Ying, who was paying attention, saw this and a vicious look flashed across her eyes. Then, she revealed a faint smile. Next, she would definitely make Yi Qian get kicked out of the classroom by the invigilator. She would make it impossible for her to participate in the college entrance exam. As for how she would do it, Yi Ying, with a cold smile, switched the exam paper from side A to side C. She actually skipped the first half of the exam questions and started on side C, which required analysis. The iron leaf fan spun quickly, sending a chill to the candidates who were sweating from solving the questions. Something seemed to be brewing in the air, making the atmosphere in the exam hall more and more tense. There was even a hint of dullness in the air. Yi Ying, who had just finished a calculation problem on side C, had a strange smile on her face as she quickly wrote on the draft paper that was given to her. "Damn girl, let's see how you're going to make a comeback." The 1999 National College Entrance Examination hadn't arrived yet. In the future, electronic devices would be used to cheat. Yi Ying's method was the most commonly used in this era, but it was also the most dangerous and the least intelligent way to cheat. She directly threw a small piece of paper. Written on the paper were the answers to the multiple choice and decision questions, as well as a calculation question on panel C. She planned to throw the paper towel under Yi Qian's desk when the invigilator was not around. After finishing the questions, Yi Qian suddenly moved towards her seat. The legs of the wooden chair creaked as they rubbed against the floor. The invigilator, who was sitting diagonally below Yi Qian, glanced at her sharply. In the process of creating the noise, Yi Ying completed a series of actions at lightning speed. Her chest was slightly tilted towards the desk. Her left hand that was holding the paper towel tightly moved under the desk. Using her right hand as a cover, the paper towel in her left hand drew an arc in the air and directly bounced under Yi Qian's desk. The moment the paper towel left Yi Ying's hand, the smile in her eyes seemed to be stained with the poison of a hornet's sting. It was chilling. In the quiet exam hall, the only sound that could be heard was the rustling of the pen. The sound of the table and chairs was especially loud. When the invigilator's gaze landed on Yi Ying, her expression had already changed. Her expression and eyes were filled with panic. Chapter 12:12. The slip of paper. The slip of paper that was supposed to land under Yi Qian's desk was bounced back to her seat. The invigilator who heard the commotion walked towards her. "Raise your feet." As the invigilator's voice came from above her head, Yi Ying's calves trembled slightly. Under the invigilator's sharp gaze, she slowly raised her feet. The slip of paper that was supposed to land on Yi Qian's seat was picked up by the invigilator. "Who gave this to you?" The voice was serious and low, like a basin of ice water poured over her. It made Yi Ying's scalp tense up, and she shivered one after another. No, I can't panic, I can't panic. How can I panic now? I have to calm down. Yi Ying bit her lower lip hard and didn't answer immediately. Instead, she quickly thought of a way to get out of this situation. Suddenly, Yi Ying narrowed her eyes, and a gloomy look flashed across her eyes. "I didn't send the slip of paper. Then I'll go all out. If I don't have a good time, Yi Qian won't have a good time." Yi Ying, who had made up her mind to prevent Yi Qian from taking the college entrance exam, came up with an idea that would hurt both of them. It was also the only way to drag Yi Qian into this. This idea coincided with Yi Zhifan's plan. He knew his own children well. Yi Zhifan knew that Yi Ying wouldn't back down easily. He knew that the worst-case scenario was that both of them would be hurt, just like now. This was also the only way he thought to bring down Yi Qian. Yi Ying, who didn't disappoint her father, raised her head. Her eyes were filled with panic as she stuttered, "No, no. No one gave it to me. I've sealed the paper. Come out for a moment." The invigilator didn't waste any more time to avoid affecting the other candidates. He took the slip of paper and said to another invigilator, "Seal this student's paper. I'll take her out." Even though Ying had already prepared herself for her math results to be invalid, she was still a little scared. Her hands reflexively pressed down on the paper. Her lips trembled as tears flowed down her face. "I'm not going out. I didn't cheat." These are the answers to the multiple choice questions and the decision questions, and these questions are the analysis process for the seaside questions. The invigilator said as she picked up Yi Ying's admission ticket. Yi Ying of the 2nd Provincial High School, a slip of paper appeared in the examination room. "You are already cheating." Yi Ying spread out her seaside and anxiously explained, "I've already finished. I didn't cheat. Also, you can look at my handwriting. I wrote it myself. I really didn't cheat." The note was in his own handwriting, and he didn't even throw it out. How could it be considered cheating? Only those who didn't know how to solve the questions were considered cheating. There was a small commotion in the exam hall. Some students raised their heads and looked in the direction of Yi Qian. Unmoved, Yi Qian finished the last question. With a faint smile on her lips, she deliberately looked at Yi Ying provocatively. Just as his gaze landed on her, Yi Ying's expression looked as if she had grabbed onto a life-saving straw. She cried, "Yi Qian, hurry up and explain. The teacher is going to ban my exam papers. Hurry up and explain." Then, she said to the invigilator, "Teacher, I didn't have a choice. Please forgive me this time. I won't pass the answers to Yi Qian again. Please forgive me this time." She wouldn't do it. She begged me to give her the answers. "Teacher, Yi Qian and I are cousins. My sister begged me. I couldn't refuse." Chapter 12-13. Hearing this, Yi Qian almost laughed out loud. Could it be that the scheme she came up with in the afternoon was this kind of stupid scheme? It seemed that he had overestimated Yi Ying. How could such a scheme be called a scheme? "Yi Ying, you're digging your own grave. Teacher, let's talk outside so that we don't affect the student's performance." Yi Qian wanted to teach Yi Ying a lesson, but he wouldn't implicate the other students. Even if it had nothing to do with the other students, it would more or less affect their performance. Yi Qian sealed the test papers and didn't even look at Yi Ying. He tidied up the stationery on the table and said calmly, "The cheating in the college entrance exam is serious. Since Yi Ying said that I asked her to give me the answers, teacher, I hope you can report this to the higher-ups and investigate this thoroughly." Yi Ying, oh Yi Ying, do you really think that you're so smart with such a childish scheme and that the teachers are all idiots? All of you, come out. The invigilator confiscated Yi Qian's admission ticket and walked out of the exam hall. Another invigilator stood on the podium and glanced at Yi Qian before coldly warning all the students, "Don't bother with things that have nothing to do with you. Do your own thing and don't look around. Don't be misunderstood by the teachers and affect your performance." Some of the students who were just taking the exam for fun and knew that they wouldn't be able to get in looked on with interest, ignoring the invigilator's words. As for those who were focused on getting into university, such as Meng Wen, who was in the same class as Yi Qian, they didn't pay much attention. She only glanced at Yi Qian when he stood up with a faint smile in her eyes. An hour had passed. Yi Qian even sealed the test papers, which meant that he was preparing to finish the exam within an hour. She used to think that Yi Qian was partly responsible for Yi Ying's departure, but now it seemed that Yi Ying was reaping what she had sown. She didn't even forget to frame Yi Qian for the college entrance exam. She, Meng Wen, couldn't stand it anymore. There were a total of 4 students in the provincial First High School's grade 12 class 1 who were in the same exam hall. Like Meng Wen, they immediately buried themselves in their own questions after being reminded by Yi Qian. Who was Yi Qian? He was the invincible evergreen of the provincial First High School. Whoever dared to compete with her would end up in a miserable state. She was admired by all the teachers and students in the school. Did she need to ask Ying from the second senior high school for sex? The teachers and students of the entire First High School would not believe it and would even laugh out loud. Moreover, the college entrance examination was the most rigorous examination in the country. How could Ying play tricks? In a moment of carelessness, he had destroyed himself by playing with fire. With such a small episode, none of the examinees in the third examination hall dared to move around. They were afraid that they would be targeted by the invigilator for the rest of the examination. All of them straightened their backs and obediently buried their heads in answering the questions. Yi Qian and Yi Ying were brought to the office of the examination hall in a school building. Not only were there people from the Provincial Education Bureau present, but there were also school leaders present. When Principal Chao saw Yi Qian, he was more than a little surprised. Yi Qian, why are you here? Other students could appear in this office, but Yi Qian was definitely not here. I came out of nowhere. This student from the provincial second high school framed me. She said that I begged her for the answers and she couldn't resist my pleading, so she wrote them down. The slip of paper with the answers is in the hands of the invigilator, Yi Qian said casually. His expression was calm and composed, without a trace of panic. Chapter 12-14. The tearful Yi Ying expressed her deep disappointment and self-blame. I knew it. I knew I shouldn't have agreed to your request. You never admit anything and only blame me. You came here for no reason, and I came here for no reason. The leader of number 2 high school was also there. When he saw Yi Ying, the surprise on his face was no less than Principal Chao's. Hearing this, he naturally had to protect his own student. He said in a deep voice, Yi Ying, don't cry. Hurry up and say it. You're taking the college entrance exam. It's not a normal exam. Yes, Yi Qian. Let's talk things out. Hurry up and say it. Hurry up and go back to the exam. When it came to protecting his students, Principal Chao was never slower than others. He glanced at the leader of the provincial second high school and smiled at Yi Qian. You little girl. Why do you always make people jealous? Yi Ying, who was expelled from school, came back to stir up trouble. How much did her family hate Yi Qian? How much did they hate her so much that they tried to sabotage her college entrance exam? They stirred up trouble again and again. Although Principal Chao had a smile on his face, his heart was burning with rage. Again and again, Yi Zhifan was a dignified provincial official. How could he do such despicable and shameless things? Yi Ying, who was afraid that she would fall behind, took over the topic. She wiped her tears and told the whole story with a determined gaze. I didn't need to cheat to get my results. All the teachers in the provincial second high school knew about it. When Yi Qian came looking for me, I hesitated. But later on, she begged me too much. My heart softened and I gritted my teeth and agreed. Who knew? When I sent the note out, I was too nervous and didn't succeed. Then, the teacher found out. Teacher, I'll take responsibility for my own actions. This is my fault. I admit my mistake. Yi Qian didn't get my note. It can only be considered as cheating. Please let her go and let her go back to the exam. Her words were beautiful. The teachers present shook their heads. She was too naive. Did she think she would be fine just like that? Being caught cheating in the college entrance exam was not just a little serious. The Provincial Education Bureau would be notified and it would be recorded on one's record for life. The leader of the provincial second high school was so angry that he slapped the table and scolded, "Stupid. Before the college entrance examination, we have repeatedly reminded you that you must not help others to cheat. Once you are caught, no matter how you explain it, you will be disqualified from the college entrance examination." Yi Qian, did you hear that? You must remember that you absolutely cannot help others cheat because of your feelings. Principal Chow said with a serious face. He did not even mention the word deal. Instead, it was as if he was warning Yi Qian not to learn from Yi Ying and harm himself. The leader of the Provincial Education Bureau looked at Yi Ying's admission ticket, then looked at Yi Qian's admission ticket. His gaze fell on Yi Qian, who was no stranger to the Provincial Education Bureau. He asked in a deep voice, "Yi Qian, do you have anything to say?" Principal Chow did not believe that Yi Qian, who wanted to study at the National University of Science and Technology, would ask the students of the Provincial Second High School for an answer. Neither did the Provincial Education Bureau. Yi Qian smiled and said calmly, "Just now, everyone heard Ying say that she was going to pass the answer to me, but she was too nervous and didn't succeed. I want to confirm it with her again." He turned his gaze to the righteous Yi Ying and said, "I'm sorry. Can you say it again?" I'm afraid that the leaders present did not hear it clearly. Chapter 12-15. Yi Qian, I will take responsibility for my own mistakes. As for you, is it that hard for you to speak the truth? Yi Ying's facial features were delicate. Her eyebrows were dark and deep. When she put on a serious face, there was a sense of righteousness in her eyes that made people believe her. I didn't give you the answer in time. Now I know that I was wrong. But what about you? Do you know that you were wrong? Faced with her accusation, Yi Qian was unmoved. I only want to confirm one thing. Were you prepared to give me the answer, but you were too nervous in the end and didn't succeed? The repeated question made Yi Ying wary. What was this wretched girl trying to do? Why did he have to confirm it again? No matter what she wanted to do, she could forget about returning to the exam hall today. That's right. If I wasn't nervous, the note would have been in your hands a long time ago. Yi Ying wiped her tears again and said in a choked voice, I regret it. I shouldn't have agreed to it. I shouldn't have been soft-hearted. If you couldn't get in, you could only say that you didn't work hard enough. But as for me, I did questions every day. I didn't even play on Saturdays and Sundays just to get into the university I wanted. In the end, the leader of the provincial second high school was so angry that he glared at Yi Qian. He was so angry, so angry. Yi Ying was a top student from the provincial second high school who could get into Tsinghua University. The school had high hopes for her. Who knew that she would be ruined by Yi Qian from the provincial first high school? Yi Qian from the provincial first high school. Yi Qian. Yi Qian. This name. The leader of the provincial second high school suddenly narrowed his eyes. Yi Qian from the provincial first high school. Finally, the furious leader of the provincial second high school understood why the name Yi Qian sounded so familiar. Wasn't this the student who rejected the direct offers from Tsinghua University and Shi University? Why would she ask Ying to copy the answer? Why would the provincial first high school's poster ask Ying to copy the answer? Something was wrong. Something was wrong. Wasn't something wrong? After she finished speaking, Yi Ying noticed that Yi Qian's lips were slowly curling up. When he glanced at her with a mocking gaze, she also realized that something was wrong. Dear leaders and teachers, I am Yi Qian from the provincial first high school. Yi Qian took 2 steps forward and stood in the middle of the office. She held her head high and her eyebrows, with the toughness of a soldier. He said calmly, "Ying to me, everything she said was a joke. First, I've never asked her for an answer. Secondly, I never had to ask anyone for an answer." "You're lying." A sharp voice interrupted Yi Jian's words. Yi Ying, who also took 2 steps forward, said sternly, "I didn't say a single lie. She did ask me for an answer." Yi Jian raised her eyebrows and continued calmly, "Thirdly, I've already finished the exam and sealed the papers. So, it's even more impossible for me to ask her for the answers." "What? How could she be so fast?" The entire office fell into silence. The exam was over. Yi Qian from the provincial first high school finished the math exam an hour earlier. How was that possible? Did you finish the exam? Or did you finish all the questions? The leader of the provincial education department asked in a deep voice. Yi Qian, think carefully before you answer. This is very important. Chapter 12-16. Finishing the exam and finishing all the questions, the former was vague and undefined, while the latter was clear. Ying also thought of it, her defeated face suddenly lit up, her sharp voice turned into a mean sneer. "Finished in an hour? Yi Qian, I never knew you had this ability." The leader of the second provincial high school didn't have the confidence he had before. He could hear the unconcealable resentment in the student he thought highly of, and instantly felt that this cheating wasn't simple. Why did it sound like there was a personal grudge between them? Yi Qian answered the leader of the Provincial Education Bureau with a smile. "I have a habit, my classmates all know. I like to finish all the questions within an hour, no matter which exam it is. I'm used to finishing it within an hour." The certainty in her smile, combined with her calm expression, made all the leaders present see that she was as steady as MDTI. From this, they could see the difference between the two girls. The student from the second provincial high school who spoke first had a thin tongue, as if he didn't know how high the sky was and how deep the earth was. On the other hand, the student from the first provincial high school spoke in an orderly manner. He didn't speak slowly or hurriedly. He calmly dealt with the cheating and didn't refute the second provincial high school student's aggressiveness. Instead, he first explained his situation one by one, then let the leaders decide who was right or wrong. Just from this one incident, the difference in character between the two was obvious. "The more I did the questions, the smoother I got, so I didn't try to control it precisely. I finished it in an hour, about 10 minutes faster than usual." The students from the second provincial high school said, "I asked her for answers. I really don't know which me asked her." "I really don't know which me asked her." Her words were quite good. Not only did it make Ying speechless, but it also made the leaders see that she didn't want to confront Ying directly, so as to avoid a conflict that would cause negative effects. At this time, even Yi Ying's lips were deathly pale. Cold sweat broke out on her back. The damned girl said she finished the exam. No, impossible, she didn't believe it. Principal Chow smiled and confirmed, "I can testify to this habit of hers. I even talked to her before and told her not to finish so early. Even if she still needed to check after she finished, she couldn't be careless." In the end, she said that she checked it once before handing it in. She even said that once a habit is formed, it's hard to change it. That's why I was really surprised when the students from second high school said that she cheated. Student from the provincial second high school, I also want to ask you a question. I wonder which Yi Qian is asking you for an answer. The leader of the Provincial Education Bureau looked at the invigilator in charge of the third examination hall and asked in a deep voice, "What exactly happened at that time? Say it again." Wronged? Why would a student wrongly accuse another student of cheating? Did she treat the college entrance examination as a game? The invigilator said seriously, "I was the first to hear the sound of Yi Ying's chair being moved." I happened to be patrolling from the bottom right of Yi Qian. I heard the sound and walked over to Yi Ying's desk. I noticed that one of her draft papers was missing. I saw that she looked flustered and her legs were unnaturally close together. I asked her to raise her legs, and then I saw the paper with the answer. Where's Yi Qian? What was her reaction at that time? Faced with the leader of the Provincial Education Bureau's questioning, the invigilator calmly replied, Yi Qian sealed the exam papers and said to me, Teacher, let's talk outside so that we don't affect the student's performance. When the other invigilator came over, I immediately brought 2 people over. Chapter 12-17. In other words, you sealed the exam paper as soon as the incident happened, right? Yes, I had just finished checking my student ID and name. I was about to pack up my stationery and seal the exam paper when I heard her mention my name. I was very surprised. Yi Qian answered the question from the head of the Provincial Education Bureau. The calmness in his eyes made Principal Chow nod and smile secretly. The college entrance examination was not an ordinary examination. It was the watershed of a student's life and also the watershed of an entire family. As the most important examination in China, not only did it have a strict system, but it also had very clear punishment rules. Once it was proven that Yi Ying had deliberately wronged her classmate, what awaited her would definitely not be a few simple words of criticism and education. Yi Qian handled this matter wisely. He only explained for himself and did not question Yi Ying. In terms of bearing, he won over Yi Ying again. If he got into a conflict with Yi Ying, even if it was found out that he was really wronged, his impression of Yi Qian would drop. He would more or less say, flies don't sting flawless eggs. Once the exam paper was sealed, it should not be taken out separately. However, the situation this time was special. If they wanted to know if Yi Qian had completed all the questions, they had to open the exam paper and check it. What happened next was extraordinarily grand. The armed police escorting the exam papers, who were supposed to appear after the college entrance examination, appeared on the campus in advance. Their appearance shocked the parents waiting outside. Why are armed police officers here? Were the morning's math papers going to be taken away in advance? When Yi Zhifan saw the armed police appear, his eyelids suddenly twitched uncontrollably. An inexplicable sense of uneasiness rose in him. Why were there armed police escorting the exam papers? Why were there armed police at this time? Didn't you say that they would be out in an hour? There are already students coming out after the exam. Your little fox, cough cough cough, my little fox is coming out. When the T6 soldier with a popsicle saw Anjusin's figure, he quickly and accurately threw the popsicle into a trash can 5 meters away. He immediately pulled his t-shirt up and put on a cultured look, quietly waiting for the girl who had shocked his little sweetheart 2 hours ago to come over. Xia Jinyuan, who had a calm expression on his face, only saw that Anjusin's footsteps were hurried. When he got closer, he saw that Anjusin had a serious expression on her face. Something had happened in the exam hall. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, the T6 combatant said in a low voice, "There's something wrong with her expression. Yi Qian hasn't come out either. Q King, I'm afraid something has happened in the exam venue." "Yes, it's possible," Xia Jinyuan replied calmly. Something must have happened if Little Fox had not come out yet. Anjusin's expression was extremely serious, and there was even a hint of hostility between her eyebrows. As she ran out, she suddenly saw Xia Jinyuan, and her eyes lit up. She sped up and ran out of the school gate. Yi Qian is in trouble. Yi Ying, that despicable person, actually accused Yi Qian of asking for an answer. Bah! Did Jane Eyre need to ask her for an answer? Why don't you take a piss and look at yourself in the mirror? What's the situation? How will the school handle this? Xia Jinyuan, who knew what had happened, did not even frown. He asked calmly, "Are the relevant departments investigating this matter?" She was so worried about her good friend that she did not notice the T6 combatant. Although he spoke quickly, he answered clearly, "Yi Qian's exam papers will be open for inspection again under the supervision of the armed police who are responsible for escorting the exam papers in the third examination hall after all the examinees have finished their exams." I'm so angry. I knew it's hard to guard against despicable people. I was careless and let her come out to stir up trouble again. Chapter 12:18. The T6 combatant looked at Q King, who did not move at all. Seeing that there was no trace of anxiety on his face, he decided to make his presence known. "Then don't be anxious. Yi Qian will be fine. Are you thirsty? Shall I treat you to some water?" This was destined to be an unpleasant beginning. And Justin frowned and said angrily, "Who are you? What does it have to do with you whether I'm thirsty or not? Why do you look like a human trafficker who abducts and sells young girls on campus?" The T6 combatant felt his heart shatter into pieces when he heard that. Human trafficker. He looked so pure and kind, and it was obvious that he was a righteous person. How did he become a human trafficker in her eyes? But this little girl's temper was quite fiery. When she was angry, her almond-shaped eyes were dark and bright, like the moon at night. There was a cold glint in them. Her expression was very tense, and she was especially concerned about Yi Qian's matter. She valued friendship and righteousness. "I'm good friends with him. When I saw that you were sweating profusely and your voice was still hoarse when you spoke, I wanted to treat you to some water to moisten your throat." The T6 combatant's gentle and patient explanation made Justin feel a little embarrassed. She said a little sheepishly, "I'm sorry, my temper can be a little rash sometimes. Please don't take offense." She had another advantage, honesty. "It's fine, I know you're anxious." The T6 combatant smiled and said to Xia Jinyuan, "I'll go buy some water. You can ask more about it later. Cheating in the college entrance examination is not an ordinary matter. We have to deal with it properly." Deal with it properly? Shouldn't it be handled properly? And Justin felt that his words were strange, as if there was a hint of fierceness in them. When she thought of how Major Xia in front of her was also fierce, and Justin could not help but shrink back. Just now, it seemed like she was a little too fierce. Please don't hold it against her. She quickly glanced at the man who spoke. He looked gentle and refined. Although he was a little tanned, he was very gentlemanly. He probably wouldn't hold it against her, right? I don't know how to deal with this matter. Major Xia, what should we do? Yi Ying's father is a high-ranking official. Do you think he'll use his power to pressure us? And Justin was so anxious that tears were welling up in her eyes. The T6 combatant, who had just left, could not help but smile. He suddenly became happy. It seemed that he had made the right choice to come to the provincial first high school. Xia Jinyuan smiled and said, "Nothing will happen. If even the armed police were deployed, it means that the Provincial Education Bureau and the school are taking this matter very seriously. They will definitely investigate this thoroughly and will definitely not accuse Yi Qian. I wish. And Justin was still worried, but she had no other choice but to wait anxiously. T6 came back with 3 bottles of mineral water. Xia Jinyuan, who had one hand in his trouser pocket, nodded slightly at him. His slender fingers stroked the keys on his phone, indicating for T6 to talk to Justin while he went to make a call. When it was time to hand in the papers in the afternoon, all the students sealed their papers and left the examination hall. The quiet campus became lively, and the teaching building became extremely quiet. Yi Ying, who was walking between the 2 teachers, bit her lower lip when she saw the armed police. She had an arrogant look on her face, but she was afraid that Yi Qian would look down on her, so she pretended to be calm and walked with him to the third examination hall with an arrogant expression. She would never believe that the wretched girl would be able to finish all the math questions. Absolutely, absolutely not. Even if the wretched girl had really finished all the math questions, she would definitely not have gotten them right. Only her answers would be correct. Her mouth was on her. She would not relent and insist on it. Let's see what she could do about it. Yi Ying, who was constantly cheering herself on, walked to the entrance of the third examination hall. When she saw one of the armed police standing there expressionlessly with a real gun, her knees could not help but go weak. She could not lower her head. She definitely could not lower her head. She definitely could not lose to the wretched girl. Chapter 12-19. Ying turned her head and shot a venomous look at Yi Jian, who came after her, before stepping into the examination room. Yi Qian, who was walking with Principal Chow, smiled faintly. So what if she didn't want to admit defeat? In the end, she would only end up worse. An armed police officer stood guard at the entrance of the third exam hall while another armed police officer entered the empty hall. A well-respected examiner from the Provincial Education Bureau entered after him. All the examinees' math papers were placed in cardboard boxes, except for Yi Qian and Yi Ying's papers. There were a total of 4 representatives and 4 witnesses. An examiner walked to Yi Qian's desk and carefully picked up the paper. He looked from A to B and then to CD. He looked very carefully and his serious expression made Yi Ying's heart beat faster. She didn't finish it, she definitely didn't finish it. How could that brat finish it when she didn't even finish it? God was asleep and didn't hear Yi Ying's thoughts. The examiner nodded slightly and said to the Provincial No. 1 High School, No. 2 High School, the notary, and the Provincial Education Bureau leader, she did finish it all. As soon as he said this, the Provincial No. 2 High School leader broke out in cold sweat. As for Yi Ying, she was about to faint. She finished it all. She really finished it all. Impossible. Impossible. How could it be? How could she finish it all? Yi Ying couldn't accept it at all. She muttered unconsciously, impossible. Impossible. I only finished the first 2 questions. How could she have finished it all? The scholar who examined the paper looked at her and said with a firm voice, this paper can be sealed as usual. As for the so-called answers, I believe in the answers on this paper more. It was a math exam, so the examiner was naturally a scholar from the math academic community. After scanning the paper and checking the answers on the napkin, it was easy to see who answered the questions correctly. Principal Chow was completely relieved. He smiled at Yi Qian and said, looks like you did well. I knew it, how could you ask a student whose grades were worse than yours for the answers? He glanced sharply at Yi Ying who still refused to accept the reality and said coldly, if we don't investigate this matter properly, it will be unfair for the college entrance exam. If we don't punish the students of No. 2 High School, there will be endless trouble in the future. We need to put an end to this phenomenon from the root. He was just short of saying, Yi Ying is lying. Yi Ying, what else do you have to say? The leader of the Provincial Education Bureau had a stern expression on his face. His gaze was so cold that it made Yi Ying's heart tremble. You have a personal grudge with Yi Qian. How dare you frame Yi Qian during the college entrance exam to achieve your own ulterior motives? What else do you have to say? What else could she say? What else could she say? Yi Ying raised her head and glared coldly at Yi Qian. Unwilling to give up, she said, I have nothing to say. I only know that she really wants an answer from me. It's her. She wants to frame me. That's right, that's right. She wants to frame me. I'm the victim. I'm the victim. You're in the provincial second high school, and I'm in the provincial first high school. Why would I need to frame you? What was the reason? Can you tell me? Yi Qian asked indifferently. His calm demeanor made the scholars who were checking the papers look askance. What was the reason? Of course there was a reason. Ying gritted her teeth and said angrily, "You're jealous that I got into a good school. You hate me even more and only want to take revenge." Chapter 12:20. What does it have to do with me if you get into a good school? You have your own path to walk, and I have mine to walk. We have nothing to do with each other. As for holding a grudge, Ying, are you sure you're not talking about yourself? If you want to die, you can't blame others for helping you. Yi Qian's eyes flashed with coldness as he looked calmly at Ying, whose expression was gradually becoming twisted. You've been trying to frame me since junior high. In the second year of senior high, the school couldn't tolerate your behavior and had no choice but to force you to drop out. Ying, who's holding a grudge against who? I, Yi Qian, do things in an upright manner. I've never wronged anyone, and it's impossible for me to be jealous of someone whose grades are not as good as mine. What do you mean by holding a grudge? And you, what kind of school can you get into that I'm jealous of? Tsinghua University. Shi University. I once gave up on the direct admission of 2 schools. Why should I be jealous of you? Before Ying could refute, she heard the provincial education department's leader yell, "Second high school's leader, where is this student's parent? Invite him to school immediately." Yi Qian's math test paper is sealed and stored as normal. It won't affect the scoring. Second high school's Yi Ying's behavior is serious and has brought a negative effect on the college entrance exam. Her math score is 0. Why is it only targeting me? I can't accept this. Yi Qian is at fault. She's also at fault. Seeing that she was the only one who was punished, Yi Ying, whose plan had failed and her grades were now 0, could not accept this. She screamed crazily and suddenly rushed towards the scholar who was checking the test paper. I'm going to tear her test paper. I'm going to tear her test paper. Why is it only targeting me? I can't accept this, I can't accept this. Why is the wretched girl fine? Why am I the only one punished? I'll tear her test paper. Let's see what she can do. The person who reacted the fastest was not Yi Qian, but the armed police who were present to prevent accidents. The armed police blocked her and shouted, "Don't move. Return to your original position." His voice was like a bell, causing Ying to scream even louder. Yi Zhifan, who had been waiting for his daughter to come out, knew that something must have happened inside. When he saw the caller ID, Yi Zhifan gently closed his eyes. What would come would come. Yi Qian also made a call. She did not want to alarm Principal Chen, so she called Xia Jinyuan. Since the leaders of the Provincial Education Bureau have already come up with a solution, then we don't have to worry. Xia Jinyuan, who had been standing at the school gate all this time, smiled and said softly, "When will you come out?" His voice was gentle and had a magical effect of making her feel at ease. Yi Qian pursed her lips and smiled. It should be soon, but I want to stay for a while and see what kind of face Yi Zhifan has. Yi Zhifan would definitely be very angry if she ended up harming herself. Don't laugh when you see it. No matter how magnanimous his little fox was, she would still harbor hatred towards her family who had treated her badly for a long time. Now that he had the chance to let her vent her hatred, he would let her stay for a while. Standing in the golden sunlight, his thin lips curved into a smile. Enjoy it well. Don't miss this opportunity. It felt good to have someone to play along with him. Yi Zhifan walked into the office and saw his daughter in tears. Yi Qian, on the other hand, had a calm expression and exuded an aura that his daughter could not emulate. He sat quietly at the side. Even if he did not speak, he would still be the center of attention. Dad, I'm innocent. I'm innocent. The way they handled it is unfair. It's not fair at all. When Ying saw her father walk over, she cried out in grievance. Why should my results be nullified while Yi Qian is fine? Why? Chapter 12:21. It turned out that the worst-case scenario was not a lose-lose situation, but Yi Qian would be fine, but his daughter would be in trouble. Yi Zhifan's heart sank when he heard his daughter's message. It was unfair. How could they? Even the armed police had been mobilized. They had even invited the most famous mathematician in the southern province. It was unfair. His gaze swept across Yi Ying's face, then swept across Yi Qian's face. His heart was in turmoil. Mr. Yi Ying violated the rules in the examination hall and purposely targeted Yi Jian, a student from the province first high school. After investigation, Yi Ying intentionally framed Yi Qian. Therefore, we have decided to give Yi Ying 0 marks for her mathematics results. The parents were invited to inform them of their child's wrongdoings and what kind of punishment they would receive. As for Yi Ying's claim of unfair, it was not valid at all. Yi Zhifan sat down and asked coldly, "Have you investigated thoroughly? As a parent, do I have the right to ask what exactly happened?" How could Yi Zhifan accept that his daughter's future was not dragged down by Yi Qian? Play the recording for Mr. Yi. The leader of the Provincial Education Bureau nodded slightly at an armed police officer. The armed police officer took out a tape recorder from his military green bag and played the conversation before and after the exam. Sealed the exam in advance. Yes, I finished everything. Compared to the answers on the paper, I'm more willing to believe the answers on the exam paper. Yi Zhifan clenched his fists when he heard the main point. No wonder his daughter lost. Who would have thought that she finished the exam in advance? Why should my results be nullified, but Yi Qian is not affected at all? Why? Yi Ying's sharp voice came from the recorder. Yi Zhifan's fists were clenched to the bone, and his expression changed. This sentence, was the biggest failure of his writing. It was the most direct evidence. Idiot. Hearing her own voice again, Yi Ying was stunned. Why was it recorded? Why was it recorded? This is the last part. Does Mr. Yi need to listen to the first part? The leader of the Provincial Education Bureau said sternly, 5 minutes before Mr. Yi came in, I received a call from the provincial office. Even the provincial governor was personally involved in this matter. Mr. Yi, as a provincial official, shouldn't you personally explain to the governor? What? The governor was personally involved. How could a college entrance exam fraud between 2 people alert the governor? Greatly shocked, Yi Zhifan made a prompt decision and said in a low voice, "It's my fault for not being strict enough. I was careless and caused Yi Ying to make a big mistake." To be honest, although Yi Ying and Yi Jian are cousins, they have a deep grudge against each other. Sometimes, as their parents, I can't do anything. Dad. Hearing this, Yi Ying seemed to realize something. She raised her voice and screamed, "What are you trying to say? You, shut up." For the sake of his career, Yi Zhifan wouldn't allow Yi Ying to speak again. Now, only one subject's results are invalid. If you do anything else, I'll teach you a lesson. His expression was so heartless that Yi Qian smirked. In her previous life, she knew that Yi Zhifan was willing to do anything for his career. Even the provincial governor knew about this. How could Yi Jifan stand up for his daughter? Unless he had the confidence to make the provincial governor believe him. Obviously, he didn't. Therefore, he couldn't help Ying twist the facts. Chapter 12:22. Ying was shocked. Then, she heard her father say bitterly, "It's my fault for not teaching her properly. That's why she did something so reckless. She ruined herself and almost ruined Yi Qian. I don't have any objections to the Provincial Education Bureau's decision. I accept it completely." No, I don't accept it. I don't accept it. Ying never thought that after this incident, her father, whom she had always respected, would actually not help her. Her tears flowed uncontrollably. Her eyes were filled with horror. How did this happen? How did it become her fault again? Yi Qian was fine. Why? Why did this happen? Why did this happen? Sun Dongqing didn't understand either. She only knew that her daughter's math score was calculated as 0, and that cheating would be recorded in her personal file for life. She rushed towards Yi Jifan like a madwoman. "Yi Jifan, you bastard. You actually watched your daughter suffer and let that little bitch get away with it. You ruined our daughter. You ruined our dream of going to university. I'm going to fight you. I'm going to fight you." Ying lay on the bed and cried loudly. Yi Jifan looked at Sun Dongqing's appearance and then looked at his daughter's stupid face. He suddenly felt irritated. He pushed Sun Dongqing away and said in a low voice, "This is a hotel. Don't you and your daughter have embarrassed yourselves enough? I'm not helping my daughter. Your daughter was stupid enough to say in front of so many people that she wanted to tear up Yi Qian's test paper. She was the one who was stupid. Do you know that? If I don't help her, do you think I won't fucking help my own daughter? Do you know why Yi Qian is safe and sound? What the fuck do you know?" Yi Jifan, who had always been elegant, was finally forced to lose his composure. His eyes were bloodshot as he shouted. His cold expression made Sun Dongqing retreat step by step. "She finished all the questions in an hour. Your good daughter thought that she was smart and that Yi Qian was inferior to her. She finished all the questions. Why did she still write a note? Did she want to tell everyone that she was trying to frame Yi Qian? Other than making trouble, what the fuck do you know? Even the governor is asking about this. What can I do? Tell me, is this our fault, or is it Yi Qian's fault? As long as you can prove that it's Yi Qian's fault, I'll fight for justice for my daughter even if it means risking my life." Sun Dongqing was dumbfounded. She fell heavily onto the bed and did not regain her senses for a long time. How could this be? How could that wretched girl be so powerful? I just heard the examinees next door say that this year's math exam questions are very difficult. I'm afraid they didn't do well. Damn girl, how can you be so powerful? You finished all the questions in an hour. You're asking me, but who am I supposed to ask? Yi Jifan opened a bottle of mineral water, his eyes dark and his chest heaving up and down. "It's already the best outcome that we can get. Also, go and find out where Director Huang's daughter is studying. Ying can't stay in China any longer, she'll be sent overseas after the college entrance exams. Send him overseas." Ying stopped crying and lifted her head from the pillow. Her red and swollen eyes glowed. "Dad, I want to study overseas. I don't want to stay in China anymore. Find out more about her first. We'll talk about it after the college entrance exams. At the very least, she needed to have the college entrance exam scores. Even if she wanted to go to a better school overseas, she would still need to have a good score in China." Yi Jifan raised his hand and pressed on his swollen forehead. He stared coldly at his indignant wife and shouted, Also, you're not allowed to cause trouble for Yi Qian at school, do you hear me? Chapter 12:23. Yi Zhifan still wanted to wait for Ying to get her grades before going abroad to study. Who would have thought that things would take a sudden turn in the evening? At 7:00 in the evening, the provincial office called and asked him to go back immediately to attend a meeting that he could not miss no matter what. Old Yi, you have to be mentally prepared. Before Yi Zhifan hung up the phone, the colleague who informed him of the meeting suddenly said such a sentence, which made Yi Zhifan, who had always been calm, panic. He wanted to ask more questions, but the other party hung up in a hurry. Obviously, this was the best the other party could do to remind him. In order to let Ying sleep a little longer, the family stayed in the hotel and did not go home. Sun Dongqing saw her husband's face change drastically. Because of what happened to Ying during the day, she was uneasy. Seeing this, she asked in a panic, "Who called?" "The provincial office called and asked me to rush over for a meeting." Yi Zhifan, who pressed the corners of his mouth tightly, knew that his voice was tense when he spoke. He looked at his daughter, who was studying in the room. No matter how stupid and disappointing she was still his daughter. Moreover, what she did during the day was approved by him. And because Yi Zhifan knew that he was responsible, he did not teach Ying a lesson for saying such a stupid thing at the end. Remind me to be mentally prepared. It seems that this meeting has something to do with me. Sun Dongqing, whose calves were suddenly weak, was anxious. Then what should we do? What has something to do with you? It can't be. Sun Dongqing, who was in a panic, kept quiet. It can't be, because of what happened to her daughter during the day. Although she did not say it out loud, Yi Zhifan, who knew what she wanted to say, had a dark look on his face. Sun Dongqing felt even more uneasy. Sun Dongqing waited until 12:00 in the morning, when she finally heard a knock on the door. At the same time, she received the bad news that broke her heart. Tell your daughter that she doesn't need to take the college entrance examination. After discussion with the relevant departments, we will punish her severely. Ying from the provincial second high school will be disqualified from taking the college entrance examination for 3 years. The expressionless Yi Zhifan told Sun Dongqing the results of the meeting in one breath. This time, they had lost. Their family had lost big time. Ying had already fallen asleep. When she was woken up and found out the result, she didn't even make a sound. She opened her eyes wide and fainted in front of Yi Zhifan and his wife. She was disqualified from the college entrance examination for 3 years. It was over, she was finished. Ing, my Ing. Sun Dongqing picked up her daughter, who had fainted with her eyes wide open, and wailed, "My Ying, don't scare your mother, don't scare your mother." Yi Zhifan, who only had one precious daughter, was also scared out of his wits. Trembling, he dialed 120. He tried to catch his breath and pinched his philtrum. His face was pale with fright, and his hands were trembling. Ying was sent to the hospital early in the morning. By the time she woke up, the morning had already passed. How could this be? Old Madame Ye's voice came from outside. She was so old that one could hear her withering. Why did you admit it back then? Wrong. How could you admit it? So what if the provincial governor knows? The most he can do is criticize you for the conflict between the two children. It's not like he can remove you from your position. Old Madame Yi was really angry. She didn't expect that 1 or 2 people would be defeated by this wretched girl. She couldn't accept it. Mom, let me be alone. I don't want to say anything right now. Yi Zhifan sat with his head raised. His indifferent expression was unfathomable. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.